Boom. And we are live with another episode of the Brown Water Banter podcast. My name is Jared Seymour.
My name is Joey Cates.
It is. And we have a great show for you lined up. We're going to talk about a not controversial topic at all. Snapper season with the Mississippi Department of Marine Resource here in the studio. But before we jump into that conversation, like we always do, we're going to thank the people that keep the lights on for us over here at the Brown Water Studio right out of the gate. Dr. Robbie Williams. Oh, where am I at? Here we go. Dr. Robbie Williams over at Southern Magnolia Smiles, man. You can look him up on Facebook and Instagram at Southern Magnolia Smiles. 2024 is the year to smile more. So go ahead and book that appointment with him. Get those pearly whites cleaned up. Give him a shout at 228-215-1202. If you're looking for legal representation for any reason, Taylor & Cox Law Firm has been practicing law on the Mississippi Gulf Coast for over 30 years. Our buddy Tyler right here in the photo. They specialize in felonies, misdemeanors, DUI, family law, divorce, child custody. No one wants to be in that situation, but if you are, you want someone that's going to fight tooth and nail for you. That's Taylor & Cox Law Firm. Give them a shout, 228-696-0111, and tell them that we sent you. If you need some tackle or apparel, anything, we got Rocky Brooks over at Sea to Swamp. You can look him up on Facebook as well. Sea, the number 2, and then Swamp. He's got two locations, two locations out on the Gulf Coast, one in Goshen, one in Gulfport. He's slinging brown water gear. He's slinging kayaks, rods, reels. He does reel repair, supports all the small businesses around here. So we want to support him as well. Give him a shout at the store at 228-205-3964. And we keep saying it, man. You got to get back in the gym. You got to get the feeling right. But if you find yourself with having trouble getting off the couch, you're struggling, book an appointment or a consultation with Forever Young Men and Women's Health. You can look them up on Facebook as well. Our buddy Kendrick over there will do some lab work on you. Figure out if you're hormone deficient, maybe need some testosterone replacement. He specializes in that for both men and women. We've had a few people that heard about him from Brown Water. Go check him out. And all the reviews have came back extremely positive. People are feeling better. They got more energy. They're back in the gym and, just focusing on their health. So give them a call at 228-363-6623. Like I said, you can book that consultation. And Dewey Do Bugs right here over in D'Iberville, right across the street from the Scarlet Pearl. They're doing boiled seafood like nobody else, man. Go check them out if you haven't. We hosted the Bay Rat Bash this year there, and it was a great turnout. We had a great time, and we really appreciate their support as well. Look them up on Facebook, Dewey Do Bugs.
And get the app. Modern Recoil is our app sponsored this month, and they sponsor in AED, CPR, any of that training, any of that stuff. So check them out, look them up, get the app.
That's right. That's right. All right. So, gentlemen, first of all, thank y'all for being in the studio today. We appreciate this. We love doing these episodes with you guys. If you could, for the people new to this series, I guess you'd say, introduce yourself, what you do at the DMR, please.
All right. So, my name's Trevor Moncrief. I'm the Finfish Bureau Director over at the department. Kind of deal with regulatory side of things, scientific side of things, management, monitoring. Essentially kind of look over all those programs and really a lot of the bulk of what we do. And I'm happy to be here to talk about red snapper and sportfish research with y'all.
And a returning guest.
Returning guest.
Man, you the whipping boy. They put you in here. They put you in here for snapper season and the other.
Hot seat. We did good. He did great last time. So we got a lot of good feedback on the last one as well. So good. And you, sir?
My name's Eric Geely. I work for the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, also in the Finfish Bureau. I'm program coordinator, and for the most part, my tasks are the Tails and Scales program, the MS Creel program, a recreational offshore landing permit, a handful of our other research projects that we do, such as the triple tail satellite tagging and other sportfish related subjects. And so I get my hands in a good bit of everything that our Finfish Bureau does, but those are the key points.
Yeah, so we got a fountain full of knowledge here. So if we got some questions, let's hammer them in.
Yeah, people on the live, man. If you got you hear anything that we don't ask or that you want to know specifically, drop them in the comments below, and we'll get those questions asked for you. So the last time you were on the show, we talked about the recreational offshore landing permit. God, I got it right. I was practicing all day.
That was good.
And that was a good one, man. That was a lot of great information. And a lot of that conversation had a lot of overlay with Tails and Scales, right? And I think that's where, at least from what we were hearing, the vibe that we were getting was where some of the confusion was coming from the public, not understanding the difference between the two. So could we, is that a good place to start? Yeah. Let's clear that up again. Maybe the Cliff Notes version this time. Go back and watch the other episode if you want the a deep dive on it. That's 3 or 4 episodes ago. So go check that out. But like I say, the Cliff Note version, if you could. And can we slide this over here to the other side? Just
there you go.
Get it all the way.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, you call it a fountain of knowledge. I'll call it like a 5-gallon bucket. We'll call it that.
Hey, as long as you know more than the other
Hey,
guy,
you know more
we can't
than
tell
us.
the difference.
That's right.
That's right.
All right, so we've got some new occurrences this year, as was outlined previous time we were here, and that pretty much stands with the recreational offshore landing permit. It's available for free on our website, no charge, and really it's our first step toward implementing a new fishery dependent program on the recreational side called MS Krill. Now, in order for us to be able to move forward with that program, we'd like to be able to have estimates from both programs, Tails and Scales, and what we're currently doing. And because of that, and I know it increases the burden on the angler a little bit, but we need both programs to run simultaneously. So, we've tried to put it in our press releases and make sure the information's out there. Everyone on the boat is going to need the recreational offshore landing permit. There aren't going to be fines or tickets associated with that this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of just trying to get everybody aware that it's existing, what it's there for, and what we're trying to move forward with. And the same Tails and Scales report requirements will exist as they have since 2017. So those both run simultaneously.
Yeah,
Got the
Get 'em,
card.
man. Get them
Right
cards.
there.
There it is.
Look at that. Already got it in the mail.
And the hope is that on the RLP side, right, the burden isn't quite as high. Yes, you got to go on the website, you got to get the card. And at the end of the day, what that does is allow you to be an RLP holder within our license data frame, be randomly selected for calls in a given week. All right, you're not going to be selected two weeks in a row. And it's simple questions, basically.
Yeah.
Did you fish this past week? And
Did we get
where?
the number change?
Yeah, the
yet?
228
Is it
area code.
still-
Got it. It's 228.
Got it.
Okay,
Okay.
it's
Took care of
228
that one.
number now?
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, there we go. We got it.
It got me because we made the change, and then not 2 days later, I got a call from that same number and was like, nope, it's not supposed to be right. And apparently it was a mix up on their side. It was a supervisor calling out and all that, but it's taken care of.
All right,
All
good,
228.
good. Josh Hartman's in the comments. He got his card as well. So people are getting the cards. They're making their way around. It wasn't hard at all to get.
No.
Just go on, sign up. Showed up in the mail. So it's really not that big a deal. But the overlap then with Tails and Scales, and then the long term. I think we talked about last time, long term goal, right?
Yeah. So obviously we've got, I think, right over 1,000 RLP holders at the moment. It's really picking up pretty well. And the expectation here is that we'll be able to run these programs side by side. So this year we've got the effort side of things going on with MS Krill that we're trying to figure out. We'll have Tails and Scales. And then next year we're planning on moving to a full implementation of MS Krill. So we'll be doing the dockside surveys that you basically gather the catch information along with the effort calls. So it's going to be the full program. And at that time, essentially what we're hoping for is that this year is going to give us a little bit of comparison. We should see some, comparable trip estimates across the board for the offshore side. And then next year when we couple it with catch, if those estimates are comparable and line up, right, the logical direction we're going to go is to likely end the Tails and Scales program and move forward with MS Krill completely. Because it should fit all the needs, not just for red snapper, but for all of our offshore species and inshore species as well. And it'll relieve the burden from the angler from having to report every single trip they go out.
There you go.
So we're in the beta version, pretty much.
Essentially, we'll call it a pilot.
Yeah.
There you go.
There it
Pilot.
is. Yeah.
Josh asked a question. Josh, I think you might have missed it because I think we led with that. But he said, what is the fine for fishing without that card? This year, it's not going to be a fine. They're trying to give everybody enough breathing room, forgiveness to get, catch wind of the program, understand what it is, get that card in the mail. So this year, it's not, but let's all, go ahead and get it now.
Yeah, but
get it out there.
Don't get caught 7 times without it, because I'm pretty sure somebody's going to say something.
Right. Yeah. Well, you were here last week and you didn't have it, or 2 weeks ago. You should have had it by now. But and Josh, if that was stars, we can't tell. But thank you if that's what that was. So, but anyway, so there's the overlap. Hopefully that was the short version for everybody to kind of understand the why and the plan moving forward. Yeah. Right. So how does that, Joey? You'll take us into.
Well, this year. It brings into the 24th is the opening day of red snapper season. And that's what everybody's fired up. Everybody's chewing at the bits to get to. So now we have Tails and Scales. Still have to report because we're doing both of them at the same time. Hopefully getting better data to where we can go into one next year. What is this season looking like?
So essentially the season is going to be outlined similar to the way it has in the past, especially similar to kind of last year. Our plan right now is opening on the 24th, try to have it open till the Sunday after July 4th. Right now, that's where it's at. If we're looking like we're going over, we'll have to make decisions at that time, but we're hoping that's basically going to be the length of the season. And then at the end of it, we'll have to reevaluate and see where we are. But right now, that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah. And that's always a hot topic, especially charter boat wise and people
Mhm.
getting trips down here and doing stuff like that. So do you think the quota we got, what explain the number of quota? What did we get this year? What did Mississippi get?
All right, so right now we're waiting for some framework action to be signed by the Secretary of Commerce. It was passed last year, and that will put us essentially at 82,000. And there are some other conversations going on at the council level with the director and everybody else when it comes to allocation and everything else. But right now we'll be sitting at a similar spot to where we were last year when it comes to the quota.
Okay.
And that allowed us to have a fairly decent season last year. Weather plays its impacts and everything else.
Right.
And it's a little bit of what we talked about the previous time I was here. You can sit down every fisheries manager from every state in the Gulf, and every one of them will tell you that is an impossible task to try to actually project out the red snapper season, how it's going to go, because there's so many factors associated with it that are not just economic, but it's also weather related and catch success. I mean, all those things play into it.
Yeah.
Yep. Josh is being funny, and he said, "Can they send more officers out to pull me over for content?" No, Josh, they do
No,
not.
they
And
cannot.
nobody wants
Absolutely.
that. Nobody's trying to get
Yeah,
that
yeah,
content.
yeah.
Don't swell your head. No, I'm just kidding.
Our Marine Patrol guys are great to work with. We've had to work with them with Tails and Scales and with this new one. But I have no control over what they do
Right.
or
No,
anything like that.
He's being funny for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I do not want that job to try to project out that stuff. That's just not
I've tried. It doesn't work out well.
right. Right. So
Yeah.
you're on that side of things. You see that side, the projection side.
Absolutely.
Can
I
you
mean,
talk us through that process? Because people think that it's just a magic number that people throw out there to piss all the fishermen off. And it's like, we want to help bring to light that there's a lot of behind the scenes that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
I'm learning it as we do these podcasts, that you guys are trying to get it right in the big global picture is protect the fisheries, right?
No, I mean, I've tried. We can look at weather. We can look at trends in fishery activity as far as the number of anglers that are participating in the offshore fisheries. And then 2020 comes through and throws it all out or 2020 comes through and throws it all out the window where everybody got a stimulus check.
Everybody was off.
They went
Destroyed
Yeah,
snapper.
yeah.
It was a parking lot out there.
Yes.
Everybody saw it.
It was.
But then the years since then, we've had gas prices increase, and that
Yep.
factors into it.
Yep.
So many things that we can try to get a beat on, but at the end of the day, it's guesswork that a hurricane coming in on a key weekend can completely throw off.
Yeah, Chris Wall in the comments, he's wanting to know how is the data gathered that renders our quota, and that's kind of where we're at, right?
Yeah,
But I think we kind of touched on that, right? With the different types of ways that we gather that data, being tails and scales, and now going into the permit, right?
Yeah, and the quota side, the actual allocation, everything else is on the federal side, and it's a pretty daunting one that I can try to explain real quick.
We'd love to hear it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're here for the weeds. We said that last time, right?
I'm
get in the
going to
weeds.
require some visual aids on this one, so I'm going to take this cup and
Yeah,
put it
go
back
ahead.
in.
Go ahead.
I need yours, and I need
There
that
you have
black
this
cup
one.
right
There you
there.
go.
Oh, here we go. I like
You're not getting my cup.
Yeah.
I'll give you my phone.
I need something comparable. Give me the water bottle.
There
All
you
right.
go.
All right, there we go. See it on the screen.
Yeah.
All right. So essentially, what we're talking about when it comes to how ACLs are developed and then basically provided. It was only in a recent time period that states actually had their own allocations passed through Amendment 50. But in order to develop all those ACLs, you basically the federal side, the federal government, and everybody else, and with the help of the states and other scientific entities, get together, gather up all the data associated with the red snapper, all the indexes, all the monitoring programs, and removals and everything else, get together in a data workshop to be able to develop an assessment. And through that assessment, essentially what you generate is an OFL and an ABC that's associated with the fishery, right? The maximum amount that can be taken from the fishery overall. From there, right?
That's
Take
of the Gulf.
OFL.
That's of the Gulf.
That's for the whole
the
Gulf.
entire Gulf.
Right.
Okay.
Start with the OFL, go down to the ABC, which is the acceptable biological catch. From there, you drop it down into general, commercial, and recreational. which for snapper right now is a 51-49 split. And it's been that way for a while. Now,
Recreational getting 49. Is that correct?
41.
41.
it's 51-49. So essentially it's
Okay.
almost
Oh, okay.
50-50.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
So on the recreational side, it's broken further down, right?
Uh-huh.
To where it's broken down into the charter for hire now because they're separated out. The federal guys have their own season associated with it. So it's charter and private recreational. Private recreational includes the private anglers such as yourself and the state for hire captains. They're lumped in within that group. From that, it is then doled out between all the states with the associated percentages that have been provided. Ours is 3.55% is where we've been at. So it's all different currencies is what the entire thing that we've been talking about for the last 6 years. That's kind of where all of this stuff is generated, the confusion, the calibrations, all the other stuff. So this bottle right here represents what the assessment was run in the last time it was ran to generate OFLs, ABCs, and the corresponding ACLs. It's the MRIP Coastal Household Telephone Survey data. So before the fishing effort survey, which we'll touch on in a minute, it was called CHTS. That was a random number dial out to households across all the various states across the entire Gulf.
Yeah.
Really nationally, right? That was a program nationally. It generated estimates that were around 3 times lower than what we're observing, 3 to 5 times lower than what we're observing currently with the FES. But that's what the assessment was run in. And so that's where all the ACLs were designated from. But within that time period that we've been managing under that same assessment, the fishing effort survey of FES, of MRIP, has come online. The estimates from the FES are 3 to 5 times higher, basically the bigger water bottle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time as those, we've had state surveys come online. And the state surveys, generally in practice, have been either in line with CHTS or somewhat below. In our cases, it's been somewhat below. So essentially, the last little while, right, when we asked for when we developed the EFPs and put in that request, we did it based on the 2017 value that we had within our program for tails and scales. 137,149 pounds is what I think it was. That's what we requested, and that's what we ran with the EFP years. We got a consequential bump, or we got a bump essentially that came through because of the rebuilding plan and how all of it worked out. That increased us to 150. Now, when the time came that calibration started getting discussed, essentially it was us having to bring this number to get in line with this number that was produced from the assessment, with this not being produced anymore, but this one being there. So they knew the relationship between these two, and we know the relationship between this and FES, and that's where the calibrations came into. So that's what dropped us down by that 50% mark.
So pretty much impossible.
Yeah. So I mean, essentially, we were comparing what we were producing with tails and scales to what was being produced with FES in order to downgrade that comparison to match CHTS. So it's just a big ball of confusion.
Right.
And
Glad I'm on board because that's where I was at with
where's the FES? That's a
that's
call.
That's still MRIP. That is the one we talked about last time. It's a mail out survey that you get sent with $2, and it's a weather and outdoor activity survey with a couple questions about fishing at the back of it.
Yeah.
So this one's been under a fair amount of scrutiny.
Because most people throw it away, or most people don't even look at it.
People can throw it away, or if they don't take any trips, they might not have a priority to do it. I mean, we did some effort stuff in the past that kind of looked at the different modes of being able to send out mail surveys, emails, and calls and all that kind of stuff. And we saw that calls did the best. Now, does that mean that what this is doing mirrors what our study was? No, but we wanted to know for our own sake. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's where the confusion is that you've got all these different currencies. And what we're really trying to do with the MS Krill program when it comes to all this is simplify it to where you don't have 5 different states running 5 different surveys.
Right.
but you also aren't necessarily doing a survey that hasn't worked for us in the past. The LA Creel program has worked well for Louisiana. MS Creel, we expect to work well from us. From the analysis that we've been doing so far with the effort, it looks like it's doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So between us, Louisiana, and Alabama doing the same survey, we'll be in a better spot as far as regional wise and Gulf wise,
You have three
because we'll
states
all
on
be
board.
doing comparable things. So that was a long-winded answer and a lot of different movements, but that's essentially what goes into allocation determination and ACLs and everything else. It's a big, large-scale moving problem that we've tried to solve for a while, and it's led us to the direction we're in now and trying to make things better.
It's crazy, if I'm hearing you right, that our snapper season was determined by a phone call evaluation or
So it wasn't necessarily our season, right? It was basically
the Gulf season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a phone-based survey for what it was, right? What happened with it is that, just as well as we all know, the only people that have really household telephones anymore might be your parents or maybe your grandparents, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that basically was dropping out so precipitously that they had to go to something else. And that's where the FES came in, because it was a mail-based survey. And basically it was a learning curve when it came out. When the estimates were produced that were higher, it raised up red flags. People had these concerns. And then over time, we gradually began to understand exactly where those problems were lying. So we talked about this the last time. And that's what's led us to where we are now with moving forward.
With the phone call, though, you mentioned the home line. I mean, they
oh, sorry.
they could have easily have been calling cell phones as well, too, right?
Not the way it was laid out. It was household telephones that were available. Yeah. And in general, the program began nearly prior to cell phones really being existing.
Okay.
Now, when we did our small scale effort survey to cover, what was it?
It was 2019.
2019. Ours did include the numbers that were associated with our licensed data frame, which likely were a high proportion of cell phones.
Yeah,
that makes total sense.
That makes
you got to put your cell phone number in or phone number in for a get a fishing license. Use those guys.
And that's the one where you call them and basically say how many times you fish. They can pick up the phone and say 0. But if you give me something that I have to work at to tell you I went 0 times, it's a little bit more onerous, especially if you're getting something in the mail.
And we talked about this the last time, but it's like that survey is after the fact, right? And you're sending it through the mail, which is no different than the way that all major, I said this last time, ABC, NBC, they all rank who watched, this particular episode of Gilligan's Island back in the day through those types of measures, because the internet didn't exist.
Right.
Well, now the internet exists. I mean, like social media ads versus a television commercial. You can see who saw it on social media. We know. And so Tails and Scales, and again, I know we said all this last time, but like that's preemptive, right? You have to book that on the app before you go, right? So I think people knowing that there's a consequence for getting caught out there without having booked that trip, as much as we may not like to do it, is more accurate, which will give us a better reflection of, help me clarify this, a better reflection of how many people are fishing and how many fish are caught. Okay.
Yeah. Especially so it's, let's be honest about it, right? It's a single species survey. So we know how many people are fishing for red snapper, and we know how many red snapper are being caught to a degree that we have.
Right.
MS Creel, the way it's laid out, allows us to be able to get all species associated with our fishery, which is still, it's a pretty good need for us at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And the way I like to see it is that, Tails and Scales has absolutely helped us advance to where we are now and advance the knowledge of our fishery beyond anything I could have ever imagined, and our capabilities and the ability to manage and everything else. And I think if we move to this program, and like I said, the results are comparable, we'll still be able to lean on the insights that we gain through Tails and Scales to be able to move forward with better management, but we'll be able to relieve that burden from anglers of having to report every single trip. And I think at the end of the day, we'll all be in a better place, not just in our state, but across the region as well.
Yeah. It's always, there's strength in numbers. And I brought it up before, but Louisiana just had their first report since opening weekend, Louisiana Krill, they've had Louisiana Krill for what, 2 or 3 years, 4 years, 5
that's
years,
long,
a
yeah,
long time,
2016.
way longer than we have. And they hit 17% first right off the bat, But that's 4 fish per boat, and that's a lot. 4 fish per person, and that's a lot of fish.
That's the
you know what I'm saying?
That's the exact question that just came in from Chris. He said, "Do you think the LA Krill estimate of 160,000 pounds being harvested in the first week of the season this year is accurate?"
I have no reason or ability to be able to say yes or no to it. But here'll be my response, right? Because we're gonna have to answer this when MS Krill comes on
100%.
board. At the end of the day, the way that survey is designed and the way the effort, which is the biggest portion of it, the way the effort is a direct call out of the license frame alongside the RLP holders and everything else. I've got a hard time believing that there'd be any sort of large scale, mistake or bias that's associated with it. From what we've been seeing and what they've been doing for a while, everything looks pretty good. The only thing that really shifts is the designation between the areas that you're fishing. But during this time of year, they're not really having that problem as much because most of those guys are strictly offshore fishing. And 17% on an opening weekend, if it's even close to decent weather, is absolutely feasible.
Because that's the weekend I don't even like going. You can't get a park. You got to get there super early. That's true. That's a great point.
We've been there plenty of times.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and there's a lot of boats fish in Louisiana. A lot of boats.
And think about, obviously it's colder weather. The water's still a little bit colder, right? That's 90 degrees today, but you know what I'm saying?
No, hey, we live down here. We know how that goes.
A little bit different conditions than what they usually do when they've started later, right? These fish are a little bit closer in. They're a little bit more active. They're probably catching them at a really good time, and that's probably why that number ended up being so high.
Can you talk on why Louisiana State has 4 and we have 2? Can you talk on that?
Loaded.
Honestly, that comes down purely to the state itself. So with Amendment 50, each state has it. Ours is Amendment 50C. It designates it out where that state is responsible for managing the pounds that it's been allocated to the way that state thinks that they need to be managed. So they can have their own bag limits. They can have their own size limits. And it is up to that state to decide how to get that.
So technically, Mississippi could have 4.
And you'd end up with a drastically shorter
we
season.
Would kill the season in half. Pretty much cut it in half.
That's another tough one to truly say that 50% increase in the back limit is going to be associated with a 50% decrease in season length. But at times, that's going to weigh out a little bit. It's going to happen. So essentially, with Louisiana, they had the opportunity to do it with the allocation they had and how their fishery's been operating for the last little while. And their commission took it upon themselves to try to move there. Now we are in the middle of a regulatory change to, essentially allow for that flexibility within our state as well. Should we ever get to the point where that is a feasible option for us when it comes to our quota and everything else?
I just can't help but listen to this conversation and wish that when I was taking all these statistic classes in college that they would have used this. Attention. Well, but I would have if they would have used this as an example. And the papers that we had to write, I'm like, okay, let's figure this out, boys. You know what I mean? Like
it's a lot more interesting.
Yeah, it's way more interesting when you think about it like this. It has a point. There's a purpose.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the color marbles in the jar.
Right, exactly. No one cares. Right?
17 purple marbles.
Yeah, I don't know.
And to that, so you get the question, do you believe that 17% of a quota can be landed in the first weekend?
Yeah.
Because of the way LA Krill and now MS Krill operate, it is able, basically the systems are able to target the recreational offshore landing permit holders, where they represent a large portion of who is called, because those anglers go more often, and we know that those are the anglers who are going offshore fishing. So those surveys that they got the week after, it's like, did you go fishing this past weekend?
Phone call surveys.
Those are phone call, but we actually start with an email 2 days before they get called. And they give them an opportunity by email to answer the same questions. If they answer the email, then they don't get a phone call. So we're using email, we're using cell phone, trying to get it directly to them as quick as possible, lower recall. And basically, those are a large portion, 25% of who is called. Then you've got for Mississippi, non-coastal residents. So that's everybody north of the coastal 6 counties.
Mhm.
You've got coastal residents. They get 25%. And then you've got out-of-state folks, which for the most part, out-of-states, that's going to be your 3-day licenses. They come
Charter
in, they
boats,
fish,
stuff like that.
and then they don't use the license the rest of the year for the most part. And so we get a guaranteed 25% of our call outs are to the recreational offshore landing permit holders. But that's not 25% of our anglers. If we have 80,000 recreational fishing licenses, that might only be 3,000 at the most recreational offshore landing permit holders. And so we get a great sample from those, and we get a lot of accuracy for those offshore species.
All right, that makes me think of 2 questions.
Well, that's if they answered the phone call.
Well, that's part
Correct.
of one of my questions
Yeah.
too. That, and then we'll start there because that's what you said. So you got to answer, and everybody knows telemarketing, and now you got the 228 number. Telemarketing has ruined, to me, all calls if I don't have your number
Yeah,
saved.
Absolutely.
Period. Hit the voicemail, and I'll figure out if you're lying or not. Right? Doesn't it still? If we're trying to change hearts and minds, isn't it still the possibility that people are like, they want to underreport to allow for more?
They could, but
Well, they could do it
the
on tails
un-
and scales too.
yeah, the
Yeah, they could do it on
underreporting
everything.
or over-reporting aspect, right?
It's not.
The effort side of things is a little bit different. Did you go fishing in the last week? Is a little bit different than what did you catch when
Okay.
you went out fishing.
Okay.
Now, that's going to be dockside. That's going to be eyes on from
Okay, so
the
so
actual
let's dive
survey.
into that. So then that is more what y'all are asking. Did you fish versus tell me exactly what you caught?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even catch that
Effort
yet.
plus what do you call it? Effort
catch.
Yeah. effort
Okay,
plus
so the
catch.
catch side of it, we'll try to catch, no pun intended, at the dock.
That's right.
Okay. All right,
And
that
then the
makes more
effort,
sense.
you're getting off the tails and scales or the landing permit.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
It's a bit complicated. It takes
Yeah.
a little bit to get there.
And as
There's-
far
to
as
get there.
the concern about folks not answering the call or anything else, when we send out our sample to the company that's doing it every week,
Mhm.
essentially they send it back once they reach 50%. And they've been doing this survey on
Gotcha.
the other side for a while and really know what it takes to get everybody and have done a pretty good job for us so far.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
once they get 50%, it's just a matter of how much
Yeah.
did they have, how much work did they have to put in to get that 50%? So they still got the
Yep.
50%.
So even for the guy who says I'm going to claim 0 every time I go, the effort's still in there. It still counts towards.
So long as he
what's
answered
going
the
on.
effort
Yeah.
question. correct.
Well, if
Too,
he's
right.
doing the tails and
And,
scales,
and
he's
we're,
got
we're not
to,
splitting hairs here, but we just,
Yeah.
I know that's what people are thinking. I know that's what I'm thinking, you
Yeah.
know, to figure out how
If
to
we
get
don't
there.
report any of that, how can they cut our season? You know what I'm saying?
That's where I'm getting at is that
Right.
if the guy that's
So-
sitting there, we want to better explain that so that they can,
So at the end of the day, right, if the penalty associated with not reporting, unreporting, basically saying you didn't go out, false abandonment of a trip, anything else like that, the penalty for that is much more severe than just your one trip not being counted. If we have validation surveys where that occurs, or if that's observed within the fishery, that basically gets proportionally penalizes the entire fishery across the board on the recreational side. So that a single time that an individual doesn't report or falsely reports is magnified as if 1 out of 10 people falsely report, then it's 10% noncompliance, and that 10% is across the entire fleet. It's not just that one person's catch.
okay.
I mean, that makes sense because I mean, we could technically bump our quota if the report is right and we're not catching what we need to. But if we're burying it, then somebody's gonna say, "Well, this dude went fishing 26 times and he's never caught a snapper. Like he's the worst fisherman in
And
the world." Yeah,
we-
And that
I
doesn't
mean,
happen.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we see a lot of that stuff at the end of the day through doing this for 6 or 7 years at this point. Like, we map the metrics every week and everything else like that. We know the fishability every week when it comes to weather, and then the corresponding catch per angler and all that.
Yeah.
So
I
we
feel
know when blips occur.
I feel like I'm going to be a bad.
Now
They're gonna be like,
Jared
yeah,
might,
I'm going to
he
be
might
honest.
yeah.
And he's like, seriously, dude, you didn't go again. Like you on the podcast guy, you didn't go again. I'm like, no, I didn't go again this week.
Well, actually, he could go the whole summer and probably still not catch a snapper.
No, I can pull one or two. It may not be a keeper though. you
Yeah.
know.
And at the end of the day, I mean, we're heavily relying on the anglers trust and buy-in for the programs that we're in.
I just want
right?
to sit on the phone with for 20 minutes with your call person and just explain to him why I didn't go. It's like, man, the wife, we had to go to a birthday party. You know what I'm talking about, right? He's like, sir, I just need a yes or no. I don't need the.
As
the
soon as I was
explanation,
stepping out the
please.
door, the kids started crying, yanked back.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
done.
Yeah. I had all these honeydews to do, man. You get it, right?
Is there a possibility? Because I think we talked about it on this last time. The phone call. Is there a possibility to get DMR, Department of Marine Resources, something in the
We can-
caller
yeah.
ID to where it's not just, that's
Well, if you,
Habib calling me from I don't want to talk to. You
Yeah,
know what I'm
so
saying?
if they answer the first call, you could save the number, right? Will it be the
So
same
you
or is it
can-
auto generated?
Yeah, you can save the number, and then, like I said, the emails are a big part of it, right? One of the
Right.
last questions is, one, do you have an RLP? The two is, you want to
Yeah.
provide an email so that you get basically a preemptive email of this call's coming, and it's coming from
Gotcha.
here. Now,
Well,
as far
well-
as the caller ID stuff, that's something we'll probably have to venture into next year, because right
Yeah.
now we're basically locked into exactly what we're doing.
But those
I'll say-
those old salty guys, email's tough.
Yeah.
It absolutely
Still
is,
for
right?
them.
Yeah.
So
You know what I'm
that's
saying?
why, just like with Tails and Scales, we always have multiple options. across the board.
Right.
We don't not going to pigeonhole anybody into a single platform, right? We've got folks who still don't have smartphones
Absolutely.
that have landlines, right,
Right.
at their house, don't have internet. They call that man right there to get a trip.
Can you siphon any of those guys over to us? Tell them we want to talk to those guys. I want to talk to the not smartphone, house line only
Man, they are living the
fisherman guy.
life.
I know. Send him our
Yes.
way. He's like a unicorn.
They
in this
still live
world.
on Deer Island.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty good. But yeah, no, these are all hope valid questions. Again, comment section, man. Y'all let us know. Let's see here. Chris says that's where the problem is, relying on people to report instead of relying on firm data. Well, I think we kind of touched on that. We're going to have the reporting side of things and then the actual eyes on fish at the dock.
Yeah.
So it's a bipartisan effort.
Yeah, well, you have to,
two-headed monster
as
here.
an angler have to do your job and
Right.
report.
Right.
And if claiming zero is not going to work every time, it's
Right.
not going to help
And-
anybody.
And the fact of it is, right, is that all surveys have inherent bias.
Correct.
associated with them.
And there's
You got
statistics.
guys that won't do it and everything else. And we do our best to ensure that what we're providing is a consistent metric of the fishery across the board.
Mhm.
And the hope is that what we're doing tracks with the fishery. With Tails and Scales, it seems like it's been doing a pretty good job so far with the MS Krill effort estimates that we've produced for the first 3 months. It seems like it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. If those things continue down the route, at the end of the day, that's what we need as managers, is results from surveys that are consistent with the fishery that match it in a relative way.
Yeah.
I've been seeing a lot of DMR trucks at the launches, a
Were
whole
there?
lot more than it used to be.
It's still- yeah.
They look like they bumped it up a little bit.
Well, we've been out there a lot.
Yeah.
It's I think I guess I don't know. Do you remember when the Tails and Scales first came out? Was it a
It
big?
was what, 3 years ago?
2000 Tails and Scales.
16.
It was 2015 was the first
Oh,
year of
okay.
operation.
But the
That
app
was on
came out?
paper. 2016 was
Okay.
the app,
Okay.
and it was kind of like this year with MS Krill, where they brought it in, slowly
Right.
rolled it out, and tried to get everybody up to speed on it. And then 2017 was really when it became enforceable.
Okay. Did y'all say a minute ago though? There's still like the paper component to it. Like if you don't, the guy with
So
a
it's
smartphone.
not necessarily paper.
No, it's just me.
but you call
Yeah, so
say,
this
"Hey, I'm
phone,
going."
yeah, you call
that phone right there.
228-325-15 or let's see, 1585.
Yep.
That's the Tails and Scales hotline, the recreational survey hotline, and it routes directly to me first, and then to him, and then back to me, and then to one other folk.
So if
Couple
I
of
don't have a
bucks.
smartphone, I can
Yeah.
still call you.
It's
Oh,
that phone.
absolutely.
It's that phone right there.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the bad phone.
Yes. Can you show the
Yeah,
bat
it
phone?
shows
Just
the bat
little
phone.
thing. Look,
That's this little guy.
That's it. It's right there.
Holy
That's the phone.
moly.
That's it.
Look at that. It's even got a map on it.
It's got
amazing.
FH13.
It does.
FH2, all
FH1,
that.
2, 13.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good
Nice.
stuff.
So
So for the folks that wake up in the morning and they forgot to download Tails and Scales
4
and they're
a.m.
running through the pass,
Yeah.
like, gosh, when they call and they get a grumpy person on the line, it's
Yeah. Hey, I'm going.
it was him
Snap, fish it.
before it was me, before
sir,
that
are
was
you
Carly.
past the Barrier Islands?
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Does
right.
that matter?
Yeah, it does. Actually,
That's
it does.
awesome. That's
But
awesome.
we like what we've done. I mean, we've transferred a lot of folks basically into the reporting aspect of it, and for the most part, we just have a handful of folks that still do it.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, even if we don't answer the phones, we encourage folks to leave voicemails, and we've gotten them where they've been. I'm heading out snapper fishing. I'm panicking. I got to get a number, but I forgot. I don't have service. Don't have the app. Whatever else. and we get them taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah, so like somebody calls me, so the voicemail actually sends an email to me with that voicemail, so I get that immediately. And if they give me just enough information to get them legal, then I can create a trip while they're offshore. And I really
Please don't do that.
Right.
But-
Don't wait, guys.
In a
Like,
pinch.
they are working for us. They're
we
working
want
for
to
us. Yeah.
basically make the resource as accessible as possible. We want folks to stay legal, especially when they're putting in the effort to help us out and get the reporting in. That like we're there as that resource.
You're the saving grace. You're the
Yeah.
the last ditch effort as you.
Yes, no, I
Yeah.
prefer the app to be
Right.
completely sound and,
And
be
it's on
easy
our
to
exactly
use.
on our app.
Yeah.
If you go to Brownwater app, it's right there, number
Yep.
one.
Link
Yeah,
straight to
tells
it. You
skills.
just type it all in. To me, correct me if I'm wrong, punch some holes in this theory, but like I think that if you had an updated Tails and Scales, call it whatever we want to call it, but where we booked the trip ahead of time, but then it had every single like a picture of every single species that you guys wanted, and on the return you just like +1, +1, +1, -2, 0, 0,
Yep.
and then hit submit in that app. Wouldn't that work? Wouldn't that be
So
as good, better than the email?
Well,
and phone call?
people still have to do it.
Understood.
so this is-
but that's going to be anything.
Right.
Yeah, it's the
It's come up.
silver bullet paradigm, right? It's the thought that, basically we did it with red snapper and it was ultimately successful and
Mhm.
it did well. And so why
Mhm.
can't we expand that into any other species, right? Because we've been asked
As long as you
about
can
it for-
handle the
Right,
back end.
right,
of
right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
So one aspect's the back end, right? We got asked about it for spotted sea trout too, and that was a big one. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about multiple species, everything that's available to you, there is a lot of species that are open year round without season restrictions on them.
Okay.
There are ways to access numerous species, whether it be from the shore, boat, anywhere else. And if we run a program like that, it's not just, hey, report to us and, we'll be good. We still have to be able to get out and validate all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have to do validation surveys, which those validation surveys will expand beyond the snapper season into the entire year round. And we're going to have to cover for all those species, which means we're going to have to.
Amberjack, triggerfish, lemonfish, all that stuff. Yeah.
So we'll have to also get folks spread out a little bit more, which might take away from the efficacy of the surveys when it's in snapper season. So what it comes down to really is just an ultimate logistical problem
Okay.
with a large increase in burden on the angler to report all of those things. And so that's kind of where we're going with MS Krill on the survey side with the dockside component. It still gets us the information we're looking for when it comes to multiple species, and it does it in an accurate manner, but it doesn't require each individual angler 85,000 plus that we have in Mississippi to be burdened with a reporting
Yeah,
requirement
that-
for every species all year round.
That
Yeah.
was a great answer. I'm smart enough to ask the question, but not smart enough to think it all the way through. You did that. Good kudos to you. But what if we did just the top, just the big fish, right? Just the snappers. I guess can we expand it to a few more fish?
And
So
we've done that in
Yeah.
recent years. So last year we actually opened it up to cobia, mangrove, snapper, the entire red snapper season. But then we'll have triggerfish overlap with red snapper season. We'll have amberjack overlap with red snapper season. We'll open up reporting for that. As of right now, there's no intention to do that this year. It's been something where we were trying to get that aspect started and see what the efficacy of it was.
Uh-huh.
And it works out, but it comes down to the resources and what is the need for it.
Okay.
So for some of those other species, it's not quite as necessary to have the accuracy of tails and scales.
Understood.
We
Yeah.
don't claim to know how many fish are in the Gulf of any given species. And we don't really claim to know how many fish are landed down to the T. But if we can have a consistent time series of
Cast
landings
net.
with
Yeah.
the exact same method, that is what we need in order to make informed management
Okay.
decisions.
Yeah.
And the same kind of principle still applies even when you talk about the big three, right? Because if we had it our way and we were able to make the decisions, like take me out of DMR, right? Me as
Right,
a person.
right.
If I'm a fisheries manager and I've got the golden ruler or the
Right,
magic
right.
wand. My intent would be to have all three of those species seasons match up over a consistent period of time.
That way you can get
Right,
them all
that
on one trip.
That would maximize efficiency, not only for
Absolutely.
the English trips, but also for the data we're collecting. But if
Oh,
we
you-
just talk about greater amberjack and great triggerfish, you're talking about seasons that don't overlap anymore. You
Right.
got 'em-
And usually amberjack doesn't with snapper or any of that stuff.
that's right.
It used to be you can go to snapper. You can go during snapper season. You can run catch your snapper. You can run catch your amberjack. Come back in, have a haul. Now snapper season usually is cut off before amberjack starts, and
Right.
then triggerfish isn't even in relation with
we
that.
get 7 days. We got
Yeah, we got 7
24th
days.
to the end,
You're
of the, end of the
right.
month.
You're
this
right.
year.
You're right.
Yeah.
7 days.
I thought that the overlap would have hurt you because it created more on the back end. All being all together would help you guys. I
Yeah.
misunderstood that.
Yeah. So, I mean, so you think about resources not only on the data side and the back end side, but also think about resources in the sense of time and resources associated with it.
Mhm.
So we still have to send people out in the field. We still got to go out and survey and everything else.
But aren't you doing that regardless of what kind of
We
effort
are
we do?
for tails.
Still,
We are for tails and scales during snapper season.
right.
The rest of the time, we've been doing MRIP surveys across the board. So we've been kind of double timing it when it comes to red snapper season
That's the hot spot.
by overlapping.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so we're out in the field a lot. You're going to see our trucks at boat
Mhm.
ramps, all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And thinking of having that same effort deployed across the other times where typically we're playing catch up with a lot of the other stuff we got going on.
Mhm.
That's where the troublesome part comes in. But like I said, if those things overlapped, then you're basically doing everything all in one because the same boat's bringing in red snapper.
That's
Okay.
going to do
It'd be the same
amberjack.
one.
And the
Whatever
reason that they don't
fish.
all overlap is breeding times,
Well,
So I'll say this, right? Because I've had that question a lot.
Here we go.
If
All right.
if we take into consideration spawning seasons or anything else like that and really take the burden off of fish,
Mhm.
you're basically talking about not fishing for anything during an entire summer
Oh,
because there's
man.
so many fish, right?
Yeah.
That spawn protracted spawning seasons, right? It's not
Yep.
just a blip on the radar.
Mhm.
Protracted spawning seasons all the way through the warm weather months. And so really the structure of those seasons and everything else were just developed from rules and conversations over time at the Gulf Council level to be able to better allocate the resource across the entire Gulf for everyone to be able to access. And that's kind of led us to where we are now and how those seasons are set up.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's other factors
We-
that are economic based factors as far as like our tourism industry peak time is not from November through February.
no.
And you have to consider that when you've got folks who's are
For sure.
stakeholders who are trying to make a career out of these resources.
Absolutely.
And that's a great segue into, I know, another topic that we kind of haven't touched on yet, though, right? With the recreational guys versus the charter boat captains, some of the questions you were asking before we went live.
Yeah, we had that on there as well, and we just got done with the Cobia tournament. And
Mhm.
I learned something this week that I had no idea.
You played it off, though, because I felt like you acted like you knew that.
No, I did not. I had no idea.
You did a really good job.
I did,
Because I was
I
like,
did.
damn, he knew that. I didn't-
So snapper, 9 miles
Mhm.
is the limit for snapper.
for federal.
9
Cool.
miles beyond the,
The
barrier,
barrier
islands.
islands. Okay, and that is, what do you call those?
Reef-fish.
Reef fish.
Yep.
And what falls under the category of a reef fish?
Essentially your snappers, groupers, amberjacks, and triggerfish. And I
Okay.
forgot the triggerfish closure, I believe, is based on spawning season,
Okay.
June and July.
All right.
So
And then we had the thing was federal and state. So you can keep 2 cobia in federal waters, but in state it's 2 per person. Right. So in the cobia tournament, it's kind of like, where's the line? And people were
Yeah.
like, what's 9 miles because of snapper?
Mhm.
But that's false.
So
correct?
right, so the jurisdiction, right, when it was extended to 9 miles, it was for reef fish only, and that occurred sometime in the time frame of 16, 17, I believe, is when
Right.
that was kind of went through, and it was not extended for the coastal migratory pelagics, which is where the cobia fall into. That's cobia, Spanish mackerel, king mackerel. So that line is still 3. So anything 3 and north, you've still got the state limits that are associated with it, 2 per person. And anything beyond that is the federal limits.
Yeah.
1 per person. 2
So
per
I'm
vessel.
a charter boat captain. I go to FH2. I can catch my limited snapper, but I cannot keep a cobia.
Yes. By the rule of the law, that's where it is.
I have to come back into Horn Island, get within those 3 miles.
Yep.
And I can keep a cobia then.
The state for hire charter captains are the most affected by that designation of what is 3 miles and what is 9 miles. For your private recreational angler, for the most part, the only one that's impactful is the difference in cobia regulations between what is currently the federal regulation and what is the state regulation.
And that's the 2 fish
Yeah.
per boat or 2 fish per angler or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
And
Yeah.
and
Right.
I mean, to lend it a little bit of information, right? We actually had it brought up in the commission meeting a few months ago, where we basically brought a lot of information about cobia in front of everyone, kind of just laid out all of it, of where we were and what we've observed, essentially, how basically the migratory patterns of it. And we'll cover a little bit of this when we get to our next topic about sportfish stuff. But the migratory patterns, how much they're targeted across the entire stretch, what we see in our state, alongside of the amount that we're catching in magnitude in comparison to the entire Gulf. And at the end, the commission basically advised the director to stay in the same spot at 2 per person. Now, that doesn't mean we're just going to sit back and not think about it all. We've actually got projects lined up to gather more information on it. But it's like we talked about the last time I was here. As a fisheries manager, I and most of the folks that are in our department are hesitant to continue to make regulatory changes stacked one on top of another without really realizing what the initial management changes do for the stock. And that was the case with cobia, right? We went from 33 to 36, right? That was a good steady
I think it helped.
thing that probably most likely
I think
helped.
most of the fishermen were pushing for that as well.
And then behind it, we stacked in this, new bag inside, or the new bag and possession limit. And at the end of the day, we just viewed it as one that was really restrictive when it came to where we were to where we are now. I mean, our conversations on the council floor and everything else were more, how about we find a middle ground here, right? Let's take a stepwise approach. Let's not take it all the way here just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we have it here. And then if it continues to go down, we'll move toward it in another 3 or 4 years. Our principle's kind of 5 years, but that's kind of where we're at.
So y'all
with
were
the
slow.
stuff.
Y'all were slow stepping.
And that's generally how we've operated for the most part. And it's not, at least in my mind, it's not out of just the unwillingness to change. It's more of, I don't like making decisions or supporting or making recommendations that could have been, otherwise avoided. So if you let it have time to play out, all the different changes, all the different things that happen within the natural stochasticity of a population, everything else like that, I don't want to hurry into changes that you then cannot go back and undo.
That's what I was gonna
That's
say.
where we've been
Taking
for the
something
last
away.
10 years.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the trout earlier.
Mhm.
Trout's been, from every report I've seen and what I've seen, the 15 has worked.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, so you got 2019 with Bonnet-Carré double opening and record inundation of fresh water. The spotted sea trout, they need a volume of salt water in order to successfully spawn.
Right.
That is impacting all of the Biloxi Marsh, all of around Cat Island, the Western Sound. That area was not able to have the same productiveness that it would normally be able to have. In 2021, we had record local rainfall. We had more than Seattle,
Yeah.
110, 115 inches.
Salinity was like -1.
And that's coastwide.
Yeah.
That's a coastwide issue. But then now we are starting to actually see say all of our standard sampling that we do that's not collected from recreational anglers. It's just us going out, our field staff, to collect data over a long time series. We're starting to see young of the year. We're starting to see better populations across the coast for spotted sea trout. And think that last year was the saltiest year that we've had in a while. We had a little bit of a drought, and that
I
did
think
not
this year's going to
hurt
be
the spotted sea trout population.
right. And oysters and trout they love salt water. Really
So do I.
salt water.
So
I
do
do. But I mean, if we get those back up, then that 15 could change eventually. You know what I'm saying? If we get the numbers.
Well, is
back.
that kind of like what you were saying though? Does the needle ever move back?
No.
Yeah.
So I mean
really,
that's kind of that's the thing, right? The population of anglers is ever growing.
correct.
Access is ever growing. It's hard to think of a time where you're going to have a regulation change that's going to have enough data support behind it to be able to go back to where something was. Now,
Okay.
we get those questions all the time. And at this point in time, I mean, it's usually split 50-50, right? Yeah, I can go down to a dock and get yelled at by a guy saying that we need to match Louisiana. And I can go down to another dock and have a guy say, you know what? I think it should be a slot limit.
Mhm.
It goes both ways.
Right.
And I
Well,
think for our folks,
Louisiana's
it's-
cutting too. They're cutting a
Yes.
lot. Yeah.
theirs was a long time coming. They've
Yeah.
been working on that one for a while.
The only one in modern time that's gone back the opposite way is with the state of Texas. They catch a hard freeze that really affected their southern regions for their spotted sea trout. But they put it into where it was going to have an expiration date, and they could reconsider at that point to make the right decision for where that population was
I actually remember Chris from Speckled
Chris
Truth
Bush.
talking
Yeah.
about that actual what you're talking about. I remember him, and he's very articulate with his words, and he really did a good write up on that, and you just made me remember that they put a limit on it. Is that what you said? Like
They shut the fishery down completely for I think it was a 2-year something to that nature.
The freeze killed everything.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I remember him talking about that.
And it was the right decision.
Right.
But then had it to where it had a sunset date where
Correct.
it would then
You
no
got
longer be in effect.
12, 13-pound trout just washing up on the marsh. And you're
Right.
like, oh my God.
Yeah, but that's an option too. That maybe do we do that here for anything that you guys can think of? Like a sunset on a law. That's an option, right?
We've kind of had stuff in there. That's more what's kind of been on the federal side and sunset clauses and everything else. We've had stuff to be reevaluated annually.
But that would be like a drastic, like an oil spill or something like
Absolutely.
that.
Right,
I mean,
right.
you're
Or
talking
hard
about-
freeze, like you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I mean, one example, I think when we had the hurricane, the infrastructure in Louisiana got essentially blown out. Basically in an effort to be able to continue helping out their fishery, we allowed folks to be able to land here for a period of time, without having to pay for a certain license or something like that.
Right.
In recent times, that's the only thing that's really touched. And you're talking about, unforeseen circumstances that can't really be weighed out too far in advance or anything that's projected. But at the end of the day, yeah, that's how you'd hope it to be handled, is that we're going to take a hit for a little while in order to come back from this.
Get
And
it
as soon
back.
as it comes back, we'll get right back to it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say the hesitancy there to make any law that you understand that may work for right now, but then pulling it back is probably not going to happen, right? So just be cautious before we implement anything like that. So, and it's a give and take too, like you said. As the fisheries go up, people don't think about it. It's like, well, I'll see more fish, or you think you see more fish. That's anecdotal. That's not scientific. But then each year, there's more and more people fishing. Boats are getting more expensive, but more people are buying them. I still haven't figured that out yet. I don't know. Do y'all got any data on that?
Yeah,
like how that's working?
Interest
Fresh
rates,
out.
anything like that.
You got nothing on that? Yeah, we need somebody in over there to figure that one out, please.
Before we jump out of snapper season, this is a big question. Louisiana is open.
Uh-huh.
And I know a lot of people, I'm not going to say any names,
Right, people.
are leaving from Mississippi and running to Louisiana and grabbing snapper and coming back into Mississippi. That is 100% illegal.
Yes. So the way essentially when Amendment 50 came through and you had allocations across states and state management, is where it is now. What is landed in the state is what is counted for the state. And so at the end of the day, so here's where the confusion lies, right? There is a rule that exists in our regulation that says if you are appropriately licensed for another state, you can catch that state's associated bag and size limits and transport back through our waters as long as you don't stop and you can land them. The last sentence in that regulation is that this rule does not apply to red snapper because of the exact situation, right? When our season is closed, you cannot harvest nor possess red snapper in our territorial waters. And that's because of how state management is, the regulatory structure of it, and how everything's basically run and the Fish and Beer accounted for. So that's where we're at now. Could that change in the future? Potentially, but it's going to take a lot more conversation and cooperative work across the states.
With that said, Mississippi opens May 24th, Friday. You cannot harvest 4 fish in Louisiana waters and bring those 4 fish bag limit back into Mississippi.
Yeah, it's
You
not like
still
trout.
have to follow
That's right.
Mississippi's
Even
bag limits.
if I have a Louisiana license, I can run over there and catch Louisiana trout and bring them back, but not red snapper. It does
That
not
rule
apply.
does not apply to red snapper.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
think a lot of people are,
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
It's a tough one, and think about it, right? I mean, if you've got a bunch of guys that have been going over for 10 years and going to fish, spotted sea trout, and everything else and doing it, yeah, of course, it makes no difference in your mind, right? Of course, I can do this for red snapper. It makes sense. I do it for everything else, but
they didn't read the fine print.
yeah,
Well,
it's just
you
the
know what it's
nature
like?
of
It's
it.
like tax code.
Sure.
Is what it's, and I understand, I get it, and it's all designed to try to help the fishery, but it gets very specific, you missed that comma. there was a comma after that said not red snapper.
Well, and a lot of folks don't think about who's managing which species, that this is a federally managed species, this is a state managed species, and each
Right.
state is different. That it's something where they know the regulations for their state and they hear a different regulation that this season's open. So, okay, why can't I go do that? It's a logical path, but it's just one that we're hamstrung on.
Yeah. So just to clarify, when Mississippi opens, you cannot have 4 snapper in your boat
No.
per person.
We are still 16 inches, 2 fish per person.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We're looking out for y'all. We're
It's on
we're
video.
giving y'all the information.
It's
If
on
y'all screw
video.
up, that's on y'all.
That's right. That's right. What's this might be a dumb question, but I'm not afraid to ask you. Why the emphasis on snapper? Is it just because it's so popular with the angler? That's it.
Well, it's essentially that is the number one species
Targeted.
and it's not just the number one targeted species offshore harvested. It's the one with the most regulations applied to it. It's the one with the most social and economic importance and everything else. And at the end of the day, that is what led down to the route of the states pushing for state management, right? And that is where this rule has come from, is from the states having the ability to have their own allocation to manage basically for the benefit of our own state. That's kind of how that rule came to be, is that you've got to be able to control your allocation, your quota, what you've got, and do it in a way that essentially allows that when your season is open, you're landing in the state, and when it's closed, you're not landing.
Which to us, it's a whole lot better than in 2017 getting hit with a 3-day season.
That was tough.
Yeah,
And
that
everybody
was tough.
remembers that.
Yeah.
You know,
And it
maybe
was-
not the exact year. 'cause
It
I
was 4 to
screwed
6 foot seas on
Yes.
Friday.
Yeah.
5 to
It
6 on
was.
Saturday.
It was. It
Well,
was
before
that.
we jump, switch gears, pull up the map
Yeah.
of the 9 mile line.
Well, no,
So everybody can
What
see
I, what I was going to ask just real quick though, do you think in like anybody here, do you think in like 5, 10, 15 years that we're having this conversation about sheep's head, which is, you know, AKA bay snapper, when the emphasis focuses on those guys, you know, because it's shifted, you know what I mean?
Guess it depends on numbers.
So we're doing like, all right, you can do this part of the bay, but you can't go to the north side of Deer Rock. You can't be off of a pylon. It's got to be. Do you think we get there?
I would absolutely hope not, but
You know,
let's say
Well,
so.
it could.
Yeah,
It could.
I mean, if everybody this in the agency is still there, management wise, I don't think we would let it get that nuance.
Well, and that's not a dig at you guys.
Yeah.
That's a dig at like everybody. We see it on the social media posts.
It's cool
They're
now.
like, yeah, well, it's like, well, what can we catch that we know is there?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
these guys, and then all of a sudden, it's like, where'd all the sheep's head go?
Yep.
It's like they're all
and
dead.
that's a tough one because, you know, we made the regulation in 17 or 18, I think, basically establishing the minimum size and bag limit because of what we were observing, right? That's
Oh,
a
there was-
species,
nobody was messing with it.
Gigantic.
you
Yeah.
got a species that, you know, some have classified as a potential aggregate spawner, right? Not
Right.
quite on that field, but
Right.
they do stack up on structure for spawning and for pre-spawning movements and make them exceptionally easy to target in large numbers and everything else. So in order to try to curb localized depletion, that's where that regulation came in place.
Yeah.
But the logical step with that would be concern comes up, we continue to look into it, we make a step on the bag and size limit, continue down, and that whole nuance,
Yeah.
that's after I retire.
Yeah,
I'm not,
yeah,
gonna-
yeah.
not dealing with it.
Hey guys, the data's
Yeah.
back, and we got some new things to
Yeah,
talk
I'm
about
out,
on these
though. I'm
sheep's
out.
head,
I'm out.
and it's going to be detailed.
Yeah.
All right, so
Give me the map.
Yeah,
Give me the
give me the map. Here we go.
And explain what we're looking at right here. It'll come up here in about 5
Well, you
seconds.
kind of that's the one, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. There we
There
go.
it is, right there. So what we're looking at is this is the 9 mile mark, right? The nautical 9 mile mark, and that covers FH2, a tiny bit of FH1, and is that FH13 as
Yep,
well?
northern nose of-
Yeah. And that is the 9 mile marker, and that is for snapper, reef fish only,
Yep.
correct? And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
And that's the state for hire guys, remember. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
specific to them.
Yeah, or if you're fishing the cobia tournament and you got to figure out how many cobia
That's
you
three.
got.
That's 3 mile. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there it is. There it is. You got FH2, you got FH1, you got just a small tip of FH13, and that's really all the charter boat guys, the state for hire guys can fish. And if you're doing cobia or anything like that, you got to know the rule.
And that is that is on the website and on the snapper page.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So don't go any further than that.
There you go. All right, where
If
we
you're a charter
where we
boat
headed
captain,
next? You said
We're going into sports fishing, right?
Yes. All right. So this is one topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts at the end of the day. So I'm going to start with basically a general premise of what sport fish restoration is, how it impacts our agency and ultimately our anglers, and then we'll go into some specific research that we've conducted over the last little while that I think folks will find interesting. So sport fish restoration, also known as the Dingell-Johnson Act, was basically a follow-up to what was originally the Pittman-Robertson Act, which was an excise tax on basically everything associated with hunting. So We follow that up with fishing, so outboards, rods and reels, marine fuel, all kinds of stuff. It's got an excise tax associated with it, and those funds are directly funneled back into the state and federal agencies at a rate of 3-to-1. So the states get 3 parts, the federal side gets 1 part. That money, when it comes to Sportfish, is for the direct funding of research projects, access projects, and everything else associated with the fishery on the recreational side. We have often used it for the last little while, not only to support the construction of access points, which a large amount of ours are covered by Tidelands, but we've also used it for focused research projects, whether they've been over at the Gulf Coast Research Lab with the tag and release program that Jim Franks has put on for so long and tagged so many cobia, triple tail, and everything else, to our acoustic monitoring that we've been doing for numerous species when it comes to flounder, and red drum in the beginning, and what has kind of morphed into our look into some of these coastal pelagics, such as triple tail and cobia. And so one of the funded projects that we've been in charge of for the last 4 years that came out of really all the work that Jim Franks has done for the last couple decades and kind of trying to advance that to increase our knowledge has been specifically on triple tail. And Eric was kind of the lead on that project for the most part. And, we found some interesting things, and I'd like for him to be able to walk through it a little bit and basically show what we did and kind of what we found, and we'll have some general conversation about that species.
So before we get into that, I hate to interrupt you. Jim Franks is how old?
He's old.
And he only deals with email. That's the only way you can get in touch with
Well,
him.
he's still got a flip phone, I'm sure.
Yeah, he only deals with email. So when you say you can't get on the tails and scales,
He's one of them.
Jim Franks is.
If only
Yeah.
Jim Franks would go snapper fishing.
That's right.
We'll be able to talk to him more.
Right.
I apologize.
No, you're good.
But
No, so it's good to note Jim Franks and his long-standing program. So, I mean, talking about back into the 90s, having anglers cooperate and put tags out for that project.
right.
And it's not just in Mississippi, it's throughout the Gulf. Really great long-standing tag and release program. So they've put out well over 1,000 tags on triple tail specifically. And I think those probably started around 2000 to 2005, somewhere in that range. And so it's a great set of data, but the only limitation to it is the anglers have to recapture in order to get the information that's valuable to us as managers.
Right.
So you've got to capture it through those recaptures. If that fish moves to an area, say the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, nobody's recapturing that fish out there. If that fish moves towards off of Texas and Mexico in the wintertime, there's nobody fishing out there at that time, or certainly not targeting triple tail.
Right.
You're not going to get those data points. So the bulk of the data that they've got did show a strong drift of those fish that are pushing south and working up and down the Florida seaboard. And they even have some that are Atlantic based that are going up and down there. There's been acoustic tagging projects which have done very similar things, except those tags are going inside of the fish in the cavity, getting sewn back up. And then when they basically swim past a receiver, then that gets recorded and then it gets downloaded and we get an idea of where those fish moved.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission and Steve Vanderkoy. They have been doing, I guess, really since the same time frame we started the satellite tags in 2019. They have been putting over 160 tags into triple tail and trying to get those movements throughout the Gulf of Mexico. Some of them have gone out down in South Florida. A lot of them have gone around Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and we're waiting on a lot of that data to come in because you're relying on other agencies. So it might be a University of Florida or LSU has a huge array around Louisiana. And so they'll download those data and then get it to the person who is responsible for putting that tag out. So it's a little bit of a delay, but also a great way to monitor the fish. Limitation being you've got to have a receiver somewhere that picks up that fish. And if you don't put the receiver in the right spot, or if there's no array offshore, you're going to miss them. So pop-up satellite tags are what we started using in 2019. We've used a couple of different types in the years that we've done it. It was deployments in 2019, 2021, and 2022. And basically, those tags, you attach it to the fish. which is a lot easier on sharks. It's a lot easier on marlin. You can get a blade into the fish that locks back against their backbone and basically keeps the tag on the fish.
Well, I think I'm sorry to
No,
interrupt
you're
you
good.
again, but Mississippi State did it with the tarpon project.
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Same exact tags.
Right.
And great project, with the limitation being that tag has to stay on the fish. So you're talking about a triple tail, not a terribly large fish for the most part, and a fairly large tag, about 5-6 inches, about the size of my sunglasses.
Right.
And it's towing that tag around for the
It's
entire
tough.
time that
Tough
it's out
on the
there.
fish.
Right. So how can we make that the easiest possible thing to pull around? We've used a couple of different methods that have basically relied on putting most recently, a bolt through the fish. It's a nylon bolt.
Sorry.
He looks like
Very scientific.
Frankenstein.
Very scientific.
Oh, no,
Don't question.
sounded-
I kid you
Here's what we
not.
came up with. We don't want the 6-inch tag. He's got to carry through. We're going to drill a bolt straight through his spine.
Well, actually,
And
we're not
that's gonna be
drilling.
better,
It's
no?
a screwdriver that's
Even better.
I've
Yeah.
grinded
Even
down
better.
to a
I love it.
pure point. It looks
Hey,
gruesome.
science.
Yeah.
Keep
So-
going. Sorry.
So we've got these fish that have been swimming around with these things, and we get recaptures every once in a while, whether it's a month, 3 months. Had one
But
recapture.
they're
with a
living
bolt
with the bolt inside
a
of it.
full year after, and that bolt is still there. It's not irritating the fish. It's got like a very like if you conventionally tag a fish like with the Jim Frank dart tags,
have a
you get a
poke.
little red
Yeah,
mark.
yeah.
It's the exact same.
Okay.
We did a demonstration of 45 days with the traditional method of putting a blade into the fish that locks back, and then it just has a tether that goes to the tag.
Right.
And we compared that against just a single piece of monofilament passed through the fish with a needle and then dragging a tag behind it. So those two methods side by side in a tank at the Gulf Coast Research Lab. The one with the titanium blade that locked back and bored a hole the size of a quarter within 45 days.
Makes sense.
The monofilament could barely even see the red mark. It was great. So it really cemented our concept that we need to come up with a way of passing this through the fish, not irritating the swimming motion in any kind of way, and make it to where it can travel thousands of miles with this tag behind it. So all the tags were set up to where they would pop off of the fish 180 days after we put it out, tagging in August, September, October, trying to capture that fall winter migration when we don't know where they are.
Is this like a shark tag? It only pings when it hits the surface, or is it?
Yeah, so the ones that we used in 2019 was exactly like that. Tag pops up to the surface at the end of the 180 days, and I get 3 main types of data that lets me know where that fish was.
Well, even the fish. Does it only ping when the fish gets to the surface?
I think
or-
what he's saying is it releases from the fish?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if the fish, triple tail, do hang out the surface,
Right.
that tag's not going to do anything until it's actually off of the fish at the end.
Right.
And not like what maybe the great white
Yeah.
tags that ping every
Yeah,
time
they've got
they
them.
surface?
Every
They've got
time they
them hard
come-
latched on the fin.
Yeah.
When it
And
comes
those are
up.
big tags with a large
Right,
battery.
right.
And that's really the limiting factor is the battery. It's heavy and it takes a lot of energy to send a GPS transmission to a satellite from a fish.
Correct.
Small
Because we don't
tag.
want to kill the fish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
So we eat it.
Yeah.
that style, it pops off the fish, and that was what Mississippi State used also, where it gives you the sea surface temperature, and you can compare that to the NOAA sea surface temperature readings every single day, and you can get the sunset and sunrise times, which you can use that to kind of generate a most likely location of where that fish was that morning and where that fish was that evening. And over 180 days, you get trends of movement that you get a track line, but really it's the fish was within this 30-mile area on this migration route.
It's kind of a probability field. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not getting like it was right here. It's like it was.
So it's like a hurricane
general.
forecast.
It's like an
It's a
electron.
hurricane
It's
forecast.
like an electron. We know kind of where it's at, but we don't
Exactly.
always know where it's at.
Yeah.
So that first year, those tags pretty much all got either cut off the fish, ripped off the fish. There's a lot of sharks in the Gulf of Mexico, and it looks like a
Lots.
fish swimming behind.
Fun.
We got a lot of theories on what could have happened, but basically those fish got to about Venice, and they were all tagged in the Mississippi Sound. They were in the area of the Mississippi River, and some of them pushing a good ways past, but within 10 to 20 miles of the coastline and transitioning around October to November. And those tags then quit transmitting at that point, and so we weren't able to get any data beyond that point. But it was clear that there was a trend for all 10 of those fish that they pushed that way. So improved the method. That first year was using monofilament. Figured sharks were a large part of that. We had one tag wash up on a beach and it had a shark tooth embedded in it.
Mm.
It's like, okay, we can do better. So stainless steel, nylon coated Surflon, basically shark fishing leader material.
Right.
All right, that's the next step up. Let's do a similar tag method where it's going through the fish. And we also changed the tag method. These ones had a solar panel built into the tag. So instead of having a battery that was heavy, it just had those. And when those fish were at the surface, we did get GPS points of exactly where it was.
Yeah.
That was very cool.
That's more real-time data that you don't have to wait 180 days,
Exactly.
all bulked up in one little memory card that can get lost, eaten, whatever, and not ever
Anything could
transmit.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we got really, really cool data out of those ones, all tagged in the Mississippi Sound. And we were amazed at the volume of movement that those fish were making in the period of 4 weeks, which was the month of October for that fish. We had one fish that traveled 400 miles.
Wow.
It was tagged Round Island, Mississippi, and it traveled from there to Deer Island, out to Horn, along the Barrier Islands to Dauphin Island, and then it transitioned back into, I guess it was around Ship Island, jumped into Biloxi Bay, pretty much right off of Marsh Point.
Wow.
And then from there, jumped out to the Biloxi Marsh, on down south, Breton Sound, back up towards around FH13, and then ended up popping off back in the Breton Sound area after that. And that was in the matter of the month of October.
No wonder we can't find them.
Well,
No wonder.
they're called lazy fish.
Yeah, they do, and they look like they just
and
chill
they're
there the whole
laying
time.
underneath a crab buoy, but
They're
they're
getting
moving.
after it.
They're rolling.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that gives us a real glimpse into their life history that we don't have a good concept for. And that's the basis of this research, is trying to understand more about the fish so we can manage them a little
It
better.
sounds more like a grazer, like a wildebeest or something on the African plains, right? Like figuring out where the food's at and just going for it, right? Maybe
Yeah.
these big, large distances.
Well, with fish, I mean, there's only so many things that matter to them. So if it's not following food, it might be for spawning. And it is
water
peak
temperature, yeah.
spawning season, August, September, October.
So it's like a human.
Yeah.
So we've got a few theories that we've been working through, and I'll guess we'll get to the theories.
Yeah.
So-
Theories about to be at the end.
Yeah.
but so we got through that year, and we got great data about the local movements. Mississippi Sound, very connected to Mobile Bay, very connected on down to Chandelier, Breton Sound,
Right.
Venice. Very interconnected. So, all right, made us feel like we could tag fish anywhere from Venice to Mobile Bay and
Get the
feel
same
like
result. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it opens our options a little bit.
Right.
So in 2022, we did some tagging out of Mississippi. We got about 7 tags in the Mississippi Sound. And then we got another 32 tags with Paul Miller
Yeah.
out of Venice.
Venice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tuna talk.
Yeah.
In addition to that, got over to the Apalachicola area and put out some tags there and some tags down in the Florida Keys. So we got 5 tags, 7 tags, and 32 tags.
Is this through the DMR or is it through the USM Research Lab or who are tagging these fish?
This is the DMR that is funding this research through the Sportfish Restoration, myself doing the tagging.
Okay.
But then I've cooperated with several agencies in
Right.
order to get this done. FWC over in Florida, the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission was responsible for getting fish down in the Keys. We've partnered with Texas Parks and Wildlife and LDWF, pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
We've had work and help with getting these tags out to all the various locations.
Right.
Let's real quick jump in here, stick where we're at. But so our buddy Alan asked, what's the number they call you from when they check you for your reef permit? Do you know the exact number? We know it's a 228 number. He asked us a while ago.
You got the phone call. I haven't gotten the phone call yet, but I can look it up.
Okay. And then while y'all do that,
Hope you
guys,
call me.
I'll throw another comment out here. It said, this is from Captain Sebo. He said Mississippi Creel is going to answer. Mississippi Creel is going to the answer. I think what he's saying is it's going to be the answer to the private anglers. I don't know why there's a dot on that. I can't read the word. There's the
Sure,
dot.
can't read all these
Access to
slides,
fisheries
so-
congregations. Sorry. He says, Trevor, congrats to Trevor for a great program. There's a bit of typos on that one.
Yeah.
But he's applauding the Mississippi Creel program and saying that it's going to be an answer to the private anglers access. So our assessment, I think, is what he meant.
We absolutely think that it's going to get us strides ahead of where we've been for the last several
exactly.
years.
And that's the big picture, right?
Absolutely.
Is a better data set. So did we get anything on the number? We're working on
We
it.
got
We're
some
working
work
on
to
it.
do when we get back because the
Yeah.
old number is still listed on the email.
That's not a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah, that's what he meant.
Still working out the kinks.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get that. But where were we at?
What-
Back.
We were talking about triple tail. We just, like I said, we did a Cobia tournament last. They had tags too, so they're triple tail tags. Did they report the same data to y'all, or is that different data pool from what y'all do to compare to them?
The Jim Franks Gulf Coast Research Lab
Yeah,
tags, those tags are also funded through Sportfish Restoration, but they manage that program. They are responsible for collecting that data. You
Okay.
call that number, you get Diane Gibson, and she really runs the day-to-day and collects all of that data. And we have access to it. We're able to
That's what I was
utilize
going to
it.
ask. Are
Yeah.
y'all sharing data?
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
work collaboratively, right? So if you think about kind of the method in which we went down this route for the other state agencies and everything else, it was more of kind of a permission based or just a heads up of, hey, we're doing this work. Would you mind if we also put some out here? When it comes to our interstate partners, Gulf Coast Research Lab, Jim Frank, Steve Vanderkoy over at Gulf States, that's a little bit more of a complete relationship when it comes to data sharing and everything else. And really, being able to bounce our theories and ideas off of Jim is a wonderful resource to have, given how long he's been around here.
Mhm.
But those partnerships are a little bit more close in. Whereas
So
the
there's no, you can't see what I got.
we
You know what I'm saying?
So there's certainly that attitude among some scientists, right? At the end of the day, that's kind of how some folks do it. We're not of that mindset.
No.
Yeah.
If someone wants to take our stuff and publish it on the Triple Tail stuff,
that's-
we're not worried about it.
That's what
It's
true
just-
science is supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be
For the greater
shared,
good.
right? Yeah. I mean, well, and peer reviewed, right, to make sure that it's legit.
Triple tail are by far my favorite species. If there's any way to advance what we know about them, I am all
Really?
for it.
Well, they kind of did the sheepshead thing because nobody really, there was a small group of people who knew what triple tail were. And then Facebook kind of went,
Yeah.
Imploded it.
Yeah.
and then everybody's a triple tail fisherman now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And most people just drove right past a dead fish or a crab buoy or something like that. Now everybody's stopping going, well, there might be a blackfish.
I think on the science end of it, you share all the information from an angler's perspective. If you know they taste good, you tell no one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my
But
We've
it
seen
only
that
lasts
same
so long.
trend. I mean, you talk about triggerfish,
Right.
sheep's head,
Yeah.
triple tail, all
Right.
of them fall in that same category of once considered trash
Correct.
or unknown. Now they're highly prized.
Yes.
So
100%.
I should mention. So we got Paul Miller out of Venice, but I also fished with Jordan Todd. He was the one that was out of Port St. Joe, Apalachicola area. Brandon Bean Storen down in the Keys and the Stanzics.
Right.
Those guys know their fishery so well, and it's amazing how different each one of them approaches their fishery. How they get into their jumbo fish is completely different in each place. Really speaks to, while the fish are the same fish, no location is the same location. You have to do things a little bit different or
100%.
find your own way of doing things.
Yeah.
And I think Mississippi's no different. There's
There's some great
certain
fishermen
ways of
here
doing
that catch
great things.
slob triple tails. Not like the ones over in Venice that Paul's been catching.
Right.
Yeah. But there's some big ones.
What's your obsession with the triple tail? Why that species?
I can take my kids to the islands and I can get to fish on the way.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a good one. That's a great answer.
Yeah.
That's
And-
a great answer.
I mean, at the end of the day, there's no other fish like them
No.
that we deal with when
Yeah,
it comes to
It's
like
sight fishing. It's you're seeing the eat for a lot of them. It's active fishing while you're running. I mean, there's nothing better than getting AC in the summer and being able to fish while you're doing it.
Right. It's almost not fishing, it's hunting.
Absolutely.
You can see it.
And that's
So I see that deer in front of me. I see that triple tail in front of me. Now I got to act. I drop a line in the water. I don't know what's going
Correct,
on. You know what I'm saying?
it wasn't that kind of like top water fishing for blue yellowfin, right? That I kind of had that same vibe when you see him hitting over there.
yeah.
Let's run over there.
Throw
Poles
plugs
ready.
at him. Yeah.
Super adrenaline. Get ready. Throw. Nothing. All right, go over here. Got one. It's the same kind of vibe with the triple tail.
And it doesn't hurt that they're delicious.
They
No,
are
that does not hurt. one bit.
delicious.
That
They
does
are
not hurt one bit.
top tier.
Yes,
Yes.
they are.
100%.
and there's nothing else like them basically in our water species wise at all that mimics them.
As
No.
far, what do you mean
And
by
then-
that though? From a scientific, how they live, how they
Yeah.
act, how they
Just from the species side, right?
Right.
There's no
There's no related species.
related species
Yeah.
that
You
you
got
can link to.
White
Now-
trout, speckled trout that are
Right,
the same.
right.
Black drum, red drum are the same. Nothing's a
Yeah.
triple tail.
I mean,
Nothing's
I basically compare them to essentially you're catching 15-pound bluegill to
Yeah.
a degree.
that swims
right?
on his side,
That
like a
swims on
top
his
like a
side.
top water flounder.
There's only so many fish that are distributed throughout the world's oceans. I mean, you can catch these fish across the globe.
Really?
Australia, Mediterranean, South America,
World record South Africa, I
Pacific,
think.
Atlantic. They're
I
everywhere.
hate to know.
Didn't
What
know
is
that.
it? What is it?
Oh,
It's
it's in the
like-
43
yeah.
pound range.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I hope
Yeah.
do you think they all taste the same?
To me, the fish over 25 pounds
Aren't as good.
It-
Yeah, that's
it's
typical
like
for most
snapper.
stuff.
Yeah.
It starts to go downhill. But-
I did make a wildebeest comment earlier, and I have eaten one of those, and it was a big male, but it was the backstrap. Was good.
There you go.
Would never have believed it till I ate it. It was good.
There you
Does
go.
not-
Weren't you that day we cooked it at my dad's house?
Yeah.
It was good.
Doesn't
It's
look like
good.
a tasty animal. to
Does
me.
not
But, hey,
at all. And I Googled it. They mainly cook them in stews, which makes tons of
Yeah.
sense to me. Now, again, it was the backstrap,
Gravy.
right? The best prime of the animal,
Yeah.
but it was good.
Well, I mean,
It's
that's
good.
across the board. Like 40-pound redfish. I'm not keeping that.
Yeah.
I'm throwing
Absolutely.
it back in the water. First of all, I can't clean it unless I got a hacksaw.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's not enough meat on it for me to even do anything. And they're strong. The drums, all that stuff. Puppy drum. I'll eat a puppy drum. I ain't gonna eat a 45-pound full of
No.
worms drum.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying? So the smaller slots are where we're looking for.
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
tell you, that brings up an interesting point. So we talked about the life history and such. Mahi grow incredibly fast, have a very short lifespan. Red drum, exact opposite. They grow pretty slow and they have a
Right.
pretty long longevity. Black drum, same way. A 30-pound triple tail may only be 3 or 4 years old.
Okay.
So they grow quick.
Absolutely. They are lightning fast. They can grow 18 inches in a year in some documented cases, which is unbelievable.
We'll fit that into our hypothesis later on.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I was going to circle to
Yeah.
that though. Yeah, so those guys are like the feral pigs of the fish world.
Except more desirable.
Correct.
I wish they were.
Well, they
I
say
really wish
they say
were.
those don't taste bad either, right?
The old hogs, yeah, the
Yeah.
little baby ones,
They'll
Yeah,
eat.
well,
little bacon bits.
correct. Right. Just choose your target, your prey.
Yeah. So let us
Yeah.
let us in on the secrets. Let us in on
What's
the
the
hypothesis. and
hypotheses?
also-
Yeah. Where do we put our
All right,
bets? Where are we
so
placing the bets?
We talked about 2021, and that was the local movements. They're all over the place. Well, switch tags again. We've switched to one that doesn't give us anywhere in between. You get the start location where you tag it, and you get the end location of where it popped off. And I set those timings to be logical for understanding what those fish are doing. So we tagged a ton of fish, talked 46, 47 fish. And those fish were mostly out of Venice, some of that out of Mississippi. And what we saw was those fish that were tagged in September, October had then transitioned January as far as Lake Charles and off of Sabine. And so hanging offshore 20 to 30 miles or so, some a little bit closer in the January timeframe. And then by February, March, we had some pop-offs that were as far south as Port Aransas and down towards South Texas. And we even had one fish off of Tampico, Mexico in February.
I would think they'd be following the hot water, right?
Well, I mean, so you got cold fronts that are pushing down, and their departure absolutely is synced up with those cooler temperatures. But
Right.
from some of the data we saw, that they are able to tolerate more cold temperatures than we initially thought. So if they can handle 67, 65 degrees, no problem. Even in some cases down to 60 degrees, which is pretty cool for a fish. But then to see them push that way and even be off of Lake Charles around January, it's not terribly warm during that time frame.
No, it's cold
Certainly
weather,
not
yeah.
warmer than around Mississippi. But that kind of works into our theory. So these fish are obviously coastal migratory fish. They are migrating along the coastline. They're not going straight offshore into the middle of the Gulf of Mexico where it would be at its absolute warmest.
Right.
When people come up on a patch of sargassum and they're 60 to 80 miles off, they don't see jumbo 10 to 20 pound fish. Rarely do you see illegal fish over 18 inches. They're seeing a ton of the young of the
baby
year,
juveniles, yeah.
and they're covered up on it. So the adults don't seem to be using that offshore area. They're using the coastal areas. And in their peak spawning season, we get the highest catch rates in the Northern Gulf inshore, pretty much right on the beaches and where the fresh water is mixing with the salt water, which leads us down the path of thinking that these fish are transiting almost constantly, finding a vertical structure that is surface oriented, whether it's a pole, whether it's a channel marker, a piece of debris, a
Dead
fish.
fish, yeah.
It can mean anything except for balloons. Never seen them under balloons.
I've
We saw
seen
them under
balloons.
We've seen them under a trash bag.
Yeah.
A fully zip tied, thrown overboard. We're like, what the hell?
Yep.
Let's go right over there
Fish.
and look. 2 of them.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
As long as it's not floating too fast.
All
then we were like, now is that considered trash?
The only
or is
thing
it
I've heard
structure?
is-
Was this
yeah.
bad or is this good? My mind was blown.
well, it's shade.
Correct.
Is it shade?
Correct.
Well, so the fish, well, basically what we can understand about them is they love surface-oriented structure.
Mhm.
It is
It makes
just-
it feel safe.
yes, and they can act as if they are a part of that structure and ambush prey.
Mhm.
So that seems to be the first level. But all of these larger spawning fish are associated seemingly with larger vertical structures that they can orient to. And if they're transiting along coastlines, to say they're running along barrier islands like that fish I mentioned earlier, and they come across a channel marker, well, maybe 200, 300 years ago it would have been a tree, but today it's a channel
Mhm,
marker.
mhm.
Well, they can orient to that and get a couple other fish that are orienting to that, and then time up on the time up their spawning cycle on the tides to where those embryos get delivered to the appropriate area. I mean, a lot of times in those passes in that area, they're getting onto a tide line, and that tide line is going to end up being pushed offshore, which is where the sargassum is, and you see the young of the year.
That was my question that I was waiting to ask you was, are these fish surfers? How much of it is them following the currents and covering these large distances because they just know this is where it's taking me? They're not, it's energy efficient to just go where the water's going anyway.
Absolutely. And I think for the younger individuals, that is absolutely playing a part.
Okay.
I think for the adults, finding a freshwater signature, because when you get really, really salty water near shore, you usually don't see a good population of triple tail. Clear water, clean water doesn't seem to hold them as much, but you get a good mix of fresh water, you get a river pouring out, something like that. The best fisheries for
That's why they're
triple tail, Mississippi River, the Amazon down in South America has a massive fishery for triple tail. Huge productivity. That's pretty much where the most of the commercially sourced triple tail are coming from.
So would you say as they get bigger, I would assume they have a more diverse, they can prey on more fish, right? So they can be more concise about what they're doing.
Yes, I think they absolutely hone in on where the pogies are at for the Mississippi as far as that goes. But each different area, I mean, they all have their different bait fishes that they can key in on. But we've got shrimp, great populations of white shrimp, brown shrimp, and pogies. I mean, there's plenty there for a booming population of triple tail.
So when it gets to that salty that we had 2 years ago, there was 21, 23, crazy. We were in a drought. Did y'all see the more accumulation, like the Pearl River, Venice, Mississippi River? Did y'all see more fish stacking up that way?
So anecdotally, because that's pretty much what it comes down to at that point, we don't get a whole lot of them in the dockside surveys, and we don't get any of them in our independent surveys where we go out and we have our standard sampling. We saw several years where Venice had the best fishing that it's ever had. Mobile Bay was kind of slow. Mississippi Sound was kind of slow, but it's not the same every single year. And I think that definitely plays into a fact with when those fish are migrating, what kind of freshwater signature do they pick up? And if it's not what they're looking for, if the bait's not there quite as well where they want it to be, then they can just keep on moving until the conditions are right.
Because that's one of the...
So they're nomads.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things, and I think that's, kind of what we're discovering, right, is that you could be talking about, somewhat subpopulations of fish that exist around specific outflows. So if you think about the largest triple tail fisheries, across the board when it comes to the Gulf, right, Venice, Mobile Bay, Apalachicola, Swanee, it's all focused around freshwater outflows. And he mentioned it earlier, right, the triple tail you're seeing at restaurants, right, those aren't typically, right? Very small amount of them are actually being called out here. The scientific name of triple tail is Lebotes surinamensis.
I'm not saying that a lot.
So
sounds like some Harry Potter spell.
I don't know. I don't even know what that.
It could be.
Is that a mushroom? What was that?
South America has a country named Suriname, where most of the triple tail exports come from, right?
Okay.
If you look up YouTube videos of fish markets in Suriname and everything else, they're stacked on plastic tables, just like
they call them something different over there, though, don't they?
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, they call
them the name, but that's basically a fishery that's associated with the Amazon, right? The Amazon is the largest freshwater river outflow in this entire hemisphere,
right?
And so it just seems like what we're getting to is that the population size or the fishery size is directly proportional to the amount of outflow associated with a given watershed, which is why on the Mississippi River and the Venice side, that's one of the most productive triple tail fisheries. That's why we're right in line with it. Mobile's right in line with it. Apalachicola, Swanee, and down to the Florida Keys. I mean, it's really kind of an interesting thing if you think about it, because that allows for tailored management across the board as far as your fisheries productivity.
Yeah, because y'all can home in on where the fresh water hits the salt water, and that's where you're gonna have your most population of triple tail.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, I mean, we started out looking at overwintering migratory patterns, right? Because that was basically went
was
through
the
a
unknown.
species profile. That was the work that was done. That's why Steve went down it. And that's why we went down it. Big questions that are opening up. And that basically led us down to, okay, well, now we kind of understand there's this dispersal that's across the Gulf, but we also have some sticking around and some that are associated with various areas. Now let's think about exactly why they're doing what they're doing and what they're doing while they're there. You know, i.e., like spawning. That's one of the bigger ones, right? Because we've gotten a few gravid females in the past, and Jim Franks has certainly seen his share of them. At the end of the day, we're not really positive about their exact spawning behavior, when they're doing it, where they're doing it, and why they're doing it, right? You can't assume that they're making the decision to do it. It's just that over time, that has become the method that has allowed for the maximum propagation of the population. So, you know, at the end of the day, those are the questions that are left for us is, what's going on? Are the days where you go out, because we've all had them, right? You go out and there's a triple tail on everything you're seeing. Everything's loaded up. There's 6 fish per mark or whatever else you want to call it. Are those days where the tidal flow is at its max, and that's the time in which they key on to spawn, and that's why they're out there in groups?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kind of questions we're trying to answer now.
Or the weather.
About.
Is it sunny? Is it flat? You know, triple tails are very picky. You know
what's funny? Like the dichotomy here is like, and the more we learn, the better we get at catching them. The more we got to have regulations. The more we got to watch what we do. Like, you see what I mean? It's like, kind of
power information.
Yeah. It's a weird situation.
Do they all leave?
To our understanding, yes. We have yet to see one that resided in Mississippi overwintering. Now, Venice is a different story.
Right.
We do have a fish, maybe it was 2 or 3 fish, that was tagged in Venice and then overwintered. I would have to guess it was on a platform about 30 miles south of Venice. That was its overwintering habitat. So
he didn't go far,
right?
Or she.
My guess is that the conditions were right as far as temperature wise. It could go down on the legs of a platform. Had plenty of bait. That seems like a reasonable overwintering site. But I mean, we see other species that do the exact same thing. Tarpon. We see it with cobia, that while there is a large migration of those species and they push to certain areas, it's not a guarantee that every single individual isn't going to follow that same trend.
Right. We talk about the sheep's head migration where they go offshore to spawn, but there's still sheep's head in the bay. There's still sheep's head all over the place. But triple tail, usually when it gets cold, they go home.
They are not.
She gone.
They are
It's
not
consistent.
overly tolerant of extremely cold temperatures.
Right.
Okay. If you can answer this question, answer it. If we can't, I don't know if this information or not. Clarence Sebo wanted to know specifically how many people have registered so far for the Mississippi Krill.
The recreational offshore landing permit,
Yes,
we're right over
yeah.
1,000 right now, with the expectation that number's going to jump about the time snapper season goes on.
They're gonna have to get into it. Yeah.
And you like your little printers, like
The printer in our office is going to be just rolling.
Yes, that's
rolling.
typical. That's typical.
Now, I think around the time of the last podcast, we were around 750 or so, and since then we've gotten to about 1,100. And really, that big jump was with our last with the podcast, and then another little jump with our press release about red snapper season opening up.
Right.
People starting to understand that it's something that we're bringing and is something.
And we gotta
Something
have
we gotta
it.
do.
Gotta have it.
Yeah.
Gotta have it.
If y'all can get a video for us of it just shooting out the IDs like right there before snapper
Gotcha.
season, we'll share that on the social.
Yeah, it's like one every 45 seconds.
It
It's
takes
a
too
real,
long.
It's a real tough one.
Yeah.
May
We'll make something
23rd.
up. We'll make something up. CGI.
Yeah.
What?
Right before snapper season.
Yeah. It's like, yeah.
12:01.
they roll.
It's playing out.
All right, so that brings up a good question that we've gotten a ton of. Probably the only other thing we've gotten aside from the Louisiana fishing. So when you register for your recreational offshore landing permit, you're going to get a 2-week temporary digital version.
Yes.
That temporary version will be replaced with a permanent version that's good through December 31st of this year, and I will do it within 2 weeks.
100%. I
and
got
then-
mine and I posted, and everybody's like,
It expires.
It's only
in 2
good
weeks.
in 2 weeks. It
Yes.
sucks. I got to get it every 2 weeks.
Yeah, they're like $10 every 2
No.
weeks.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And
We'll
what
take
that-
care of that next year.
Right.
And what that does is it gives me time to verify the information because we don't have the full framework of being able to link into the MDWFP fishing license frame and verify, okay, yes, this is a fishing license. This is the person. Everything makes sense. And so there's a manual aspect to that currently. And so going through and making sure that all the information is appropriate, then getting the hard copies sent out after that.
It's funny because like a lot of times when things like this happen, you hear people complain like they keep doing this, they did that, they this, they that. To have the guy here, not who made the decision, but the poor guy who's in the background, like printing all the stuff, trying to check. Okay, this is a real guy. Boom, boom, boom. All right, print it out, send it out. Now I need
He's even
2
got the
weeks.
phone.
Can he get
He's even
2
got the
weeks?
phone.
Can the guy get 2 weeks to get the damn card
I will
made?
say the taking the card out, sticking in an envelope, sticking your name and
That's
address
you.
label on. No, we got
Yeah.
some folks that
Okay,
are absolutely
all right. I
helping
feel
out.
better.
It's
I feel
not just
better.
me.
I feel better about
There
that.
are 17 employees in the Fin Fish Bureau, and at this point, probably 12 of the 17 have packed envelopes and sent them out, and they're all normal people like us.
do you
Y'all
know?
buying a bunch of water?
Do you know?
Everybody's sitting there. And,
Oh, no, like we got Susan from Seinfeld.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 No, it makes me think
We've
of the,
avoided that.
the Willy Wonka where the rich dad's paying all the girls to open all the tickets up for him, and they have that big warehouse, and they're overlooking them all like, "Go work harder, work faster."
Yes.
Yeah,
More
Daddy,
envelopes, more
They don't want
envelopes.
me to win. Yeah,
No.
is that what y'all's office looks like?
No, we got a little paintbrush. Go over it.
Yeah.
but
Is there any way we get a photo? Is that legal? Can y'all just like snap us a photo and send it to us of the packing all the stuff?
No
Oh, yeah,
PII. We'll be good.
Yeah, the controlled chaos of
Yes,
my entire
yes,
desk
we would
full of
love to
envelopes.
see that. That would be great.
Not
It's
to
like-
mention the construction we're in that has us condensed into.
Even better.
Yeah.
Even better for the socials. Yeah.
because this is what we're.
Please get us.
DMR used to be a huge secret, and now Brownwater's kind of
We want
bringing
to.
it
We want
out
the people to
light.
know. We
Yeah.
want
They're
y'all
not
to
bad. They're not bad
get,
guys.
They're great guys. We want y'all to get noticed at a bar or at a restaurant. You know?
Yeah.
I don't need that.
I don't want.
It's
that.
like, hey man, can you get my? I've
Yeah.
had it like 2 days.
Yeah.
I do love hearing triple tail conspiracy theories, but I don't need.
Oh,
them all
give
the
us
time.
one. Give us one. I have never heard any. I love a good conspiracy theory.
So the thought that triple tail, they sink down to the bottom in the winter and they just sink
Like a flounder.
basically just
Yeah.
sit in the mud for
Hover,
4
yeah.
months and wait until the temperatures get warm and then they come back up. And they don't actually go anywhere. That
Okay.
they're always here.
They leave.
There's a good one from Jim a while back. It was at one of the, I think it was a like a social thing that we used to do for sport fish and everything else. But they talked about triple tail right when it first came online and how he brought it to light, and all the people who knew about triple tail were complaining to him. And then I think they had this program where it was basically like clean up the sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Let's pick up all the trash and
Yeah.
out of the sound. So they went out there and they cleaned up all the trash and everything else. And the next thing you know, he's got people coming to him pissed off, like, you took all the triple tail habitat away from us because you're trying to clean up the sound. Should have
Love
just left those trash bags out.
Yeah.
But
That's
Here
what I
you
said.
go, trying to do the best thing, and you're just ruining it for everyone.
We were blown away. I was like, man, who would throw a full trash bag out
Some
like that?
people go too far. Some people go too
Yeah.
far with their fads. Like you can't have 84 pool noodles tied to a
Right.
center block sitting in
Right.
the back bay. You
Not
can't do that.
sustainable practice.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct,
yeah.
correct. It's not good for the environment.
Yeah.
So, well, gentlemen, I think did we cover any? Is there anything else out there? I mean, you guys know, you see it more than we do.
So the last thing on the sport fish side, right, is that I said we're not done with cobia, right? We're not just going to sit idly by. We are partnering with USGS and Steve once again to be able to put out up to right now 40 satellite tags on cobia in the region, and that's going to expand kind of the same realm that we did with triple tail to try to cover the area to really figure out, do we have some fish overwintering? Is it an east-west split? You know, what's it like when these fish are going back down south? And so,
Yeah. So I helped USGS out this past, I guess it was March, and they worked on putting out satellite tags using the exact same methodology that we used on triple tail to attach it to cobia. So they had about 40 satellite tags that they were putting out in the, I guess, Fort Myers down past Sanibel, a little bit south of there. And so they've got those out in their migratory process. And so they're hoping to get a good information set for where those fish are actually transiting, if they're pushing further offshore, if they're pushing up across Destin, just down lower in the water column, trying to answer some of those questions with their goal being species that are potentially affected by climate change, whether it's temperature, whether it's anthropogenic effects, people that have I guess the fishing pressures that are actually affecting the fish,
Yes.
trying to get some information
100%.
towards that side of things. And so we want to also get in on that and try to answer some of these questions for the Northern Gulf and get the best possible data set that we can make sound management decisions off of.
Yeah. Because I guess the migration was always the Carolinas around Florida, past Mississippi to Venice. They spawn in Venice, go back around.
So there's a little split right there, right? So essentially the hub, there's a little bit of crossover with cobia, unlike triple tail. There's only been one ever recorded triple tail making the pass from the Gulf side to the South Atlantic side.
They don't do it.
But with cobia, there's a fair proportion. Essentially, kind of the hypothesis is that you've got this, north to west migration, and they come back down, and that's the hub. And at the same time, you've got fish going up the East Coast. And when they hub in, there's the chance that some of them mix, and some of them that went up to the Gulf might go up the Atlantic side.
Okay.
It's a small proportion, but it still occurs. And really, it's kind of like Eric said, our goal here is to not only bolster the ongoing project that they have going on by putting out the same sort of tags in a different region, but it also answers a question for us management wise, right? Because we chose not to go forward with a regulation that matched the federal side because we wanted to gather more information and more have a little bit increased knowledge of what that stock is actually doing on an annual basis when it comes to movement and everything else. So, part of it is us just trying to answer the questions for ourselves to either, not necessarily make management decisions, but potentially not make management decisions.
Like you
That could
mentioned
also go the
earlier.
other way.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the heavily fish. And I know this could be a whole segment.
It could be its own talk.
Yeah, we're not going to get into it, but there's a lot of places in the world where cobia just magically disappeared, but they just got hammered. And I think the migration patterns have changed since then.
It is entirely possible.
Anecdotally.
Yeah.
It is
So far, correct me if I'm wrong.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is there probably a shift in the stock due to popularity and everything else?
Right.
Yes. But at the same time, multiple factors can weigh into how we observe all this. And it's really easy to pick out scapegoats of one individual variable when it comes to decreased stock size or anything else. But there's all kinds of stuff going on in the water that we don't really know.
Right.
And the anglers typically see before we do. So
yeah, because there's way more of us than y'all.
that's right.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, our job is to try to balance all that information, take it all in, and make the best decision possible to be able to have an available stock for harvest by the anglers and to keep it going.
Try to make
sustainable
everybody
in the
happy.
future.
Is Mississippi going to federal limits on cobia?
Not as of right now. So what I spoke to earlier is that we actually presented that in front of our commission. That presentation's on the website and the conversations on the website and everything else. I'd encourage anyone to go over there and look at it. But as of right now, no, we are not going to the federal limits.
We went fork length. We did the size.
We
and
did went to
everything,
36.
But the bag limit.
Right. The bag
Chips.
limit for us when it went from 2 per person all the way down was just a little bit too far. And so we had discussions about, essentially the breadth of their migration, the harvest patterns across each one of the states, how much Mississippi makes of that proportion, and the decreased access for a lot of fisheries that we've had to basically stomach on the federal side for quite a while. And at the end of the day, the commission advised to essentially let's hold off and see where we're at.
I don't think there's any more proactive fishermen in the world than a cobia fisherman, especially on the Gulf Coast, because even them are like, it's 36 to the fork, but most of the tournaments around here are 40. So they want the bigger non-breeders, saying
Right.
let them grow up and let them do what it is, because they pretty much disappeared in some places. But this week we had a pretty good turnout. So
Yeah, and that was actually Clarence, he's provided some comment here, and I've always appreciated his input on things and everything else. He was one of the ones who brought it up at the commission. And
Yeah.
when we first
he came on the show.
Yeah, he
right
came on the
after
show
us.
right
Yeah,
after
yeah.
that. We had a lot of reactions to that. It was a good show.
Yeah. And
We just
that's-
talked to him about coming back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I would encourage for, a lot of the folks that are listening and everything else. The commission meetings are during the day, so it's a hard time to get off work and everything else. But, if you've got a topic, I get calls every day from anglers. Eric hears it a lot from the Tails and Scales hotline. The best thing to do is just to try to, provide your input if you're truly concerned about something and try to get a little bit more information about it from us.
Yeah.
That's what we're there for.
Buy-in. That's what I would call it,
Yeah.
right? Don't just complain. Be
No.
about the solution.
And put in the right numbers. Don't fudge anything. We need to know the right data.
Yeah. I think if we've learned anything today, it's just that we need to all shift our focus to hardhead catfish and fish the Bay Rat Bash 2025, and then, wipe that species out completely. So,
And I don't think anybody would complain
I
about
don't-
sharks or
I
hardhead
don't think you
catfish.
can do it. That's what I think. I don't think you can do it even if you tried. Gentlemen, one last question before we wrap it up. If somebody was listening to this today, especially if there's like some younger listeners that were hearing this, the science that y'all are doing is super cool. And I made a couple jokes about statistics, and it drives it home when you realize what this stuff is about and how you can apply it. If somebody wants to get into what you guys do, what's the route? Seriously.
All right. So we always have a joke of like, make sure you look at the average salaries of fisheries biologists before you do it. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, but you could start a TikTok channel with what you guys know right now and quadruple your salary.
Yeah. So
there you go. All right.
my pathway, right? I actually went to UGA Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources and really focused on natural resource management and fisheries specifically, then came down here.
Why? Can I ask you that? Why did you do? No. Why did you focus on? Was it
Because I was a
passion?
fisherman, right? So I was a fisherman. My existence, I wanted to be a professional fisherman. I wanted to fish tournaments and everything else. I fished spotted sea trout and red drum tournaments when I was working through junior college and everything else. But basically, when I was graduating high school, professional fisherman wasn't an option to my parents, and it was do something.
Go to work, pay
And
some
so-
taxes.
Said, all
Good
right,
job, hippie.
Yeah,
Let's
Yeah.
go.
I'm gonna do
Can't fish for a
as
living.
close to fisheries as I can. And at that time, I was really, I'd started really fishing saltwater a lot and shifted my focus from the freshwater species to saltwater. And that's just kind of what I followed all the way through. So while I went to a natural resource school that was mainly focused on freshwater, I did everything I could to steer into saltwater, and basically do it that way. So, I would just encourage folks, if they're really interested in it, to, think about schools that have direct impact, think about intern programs with the agency and the others around, and just try to get into it and see if it's for you. Because at the end of the day, it's the one thing I'm an expert in. So if I lose this job, I'm kind of
Well, that was
on the highway.
that was a loaded question, and the reason I asked it is just so people can understand, one, if they're feeling that vibe, how to go, but also to understand that the people that are working on the other side, like you guys, like, you're a fisherman at heart. You have a passion for this.
Not the bad guy.
You dedicate your life to this. So while there's always going to be a difference of opinion on what we should or shouldn't do, you come from the same place. That you're not a different
And
person. You're an angler.
I'll say this. So there's a lot of our colleagues and counterparts that we work in across the Gulf, because fishery is a small world, that don't necessarily fit that bill.
Really?
They might not be fishermen. They don't really see it the same way. But
What were they? Just science guys or
Scientists,
something?
Yeah,
marine biologists.
data
yeah,
specialists.
ecologists, marine mammals, that kind of stuff. Like, it can go across the board.
Would you have a statistics guy that's a data guy only that doesn't really need to know, care to know? That'd be a subset of it, right?
There's absolutely value to that. Yes.
Right. No, sure. But they are part
At
of
the
this
end of the
process
day-
too.
Oh yeah.
So I've always been this way, right? So as long as you're willing to absolutely look into the perspectives of everyone around you, regardless of what their expertise or background is, to understand where they're coming from, you get a better idea of how to really anchor. If you sit there all on your own, running your program or trying to manage the species or coming up with rules and regulations, and aren't really diversifying your perspective, your bias is associated with anchoring and everything else, right? When you get numbers in front of your face, those numbers are the truth, right? That's
to
it.
be.
That's all I
The
got.
numbers are the
Correct.
Women lie, men lie, numbers don't.
And so
Unless
that's
they're
the
not
thing.
accurate.
That's
Yeah.
So even if the numbers are way off, right? The numbers are all they know. But if you're talking to other folks, right? I've had times and he's had times, and I've had my supervisors do it to me, right? You come up with analysis or anything else you put in front of them, they're like, that's wrong. What are you talking about? I just did this. And they're like,
Right.
no, that's wrong. It's like, that's knowledge, right? That's knowledge over time, perspective, being able to see it over a large period of time, and knowing in the back of your head how your fishery operates and what it does. And turns out in those times, I was wrong.
So it's like knowledge versus wisdom,
That's right.
right? It's got a little bit of
And it
wisdom
takes
in
all those expertise. Now, Eric, I'll let him talk.
Yeah,
He
I want to know your backstory.
he had a
Yeah.
different background.
All right, let's hear it.
Yeah. So my passion, why do I care about marine fisheries?
Yeah,
I grew up fishing with my grandparents down in South Florida. They lived there from the 50s through the early 2000s, and go down there 4 or 5 times a year, and we just smack sheep's head just over and over and over again. But we really were just inshore fishing, and that's where I grew up fishing. through high school, I would bass fish as much as I could out of Houston. But then got moved over to Atlanta, Georgia with my dad's job and senior year of high school. So, all right, found a small school in Savannah, Georgia, Armstrong State University, now Armstrong campus of Georgia Southern. Small school, found out junior year that I could get a 6-hour credits worth of class by just going out and fishing. So I developed a research. Developed a research project to go out and catch as many redfish as I could, count the number of spots on each side, record it, and try to get an understanding of what the proportions are for them.
Easiest grade you ever
Science.
Ended up being kind of cool. So it was
Hell yeah.
66% totally normal spots, 33% some variation of irregular spotting, and one fish that was the
Had like 10 spots on it, yeah.
unspotted.
What was
Oh,
your
really? No spotted,
What,
yeah.
what was your sample size?
200.
Oh,
It's pretty big.
Yeah, nice.
One summer, not
Nailed
bad.
it. Oh yeah.
Hey,
I was
drop
expecting
us
way.
a pin. Drop us a pin.
I was like way
Right.
lower than that. Yeah.
No,
yeah,
and
yeah,
90%
yeah.
of them came from one spot.
Yeah.
That's okay. Don't tell that's
Yeah.
fine.
No. So basically, kind of really enjoyed that. Got into some of the genetics with marine fisheries with a research advisor, and thought, all right, this is a real pathway. So, about to graduate, put in for a couple of grad schools, got down to the University of Southern Mississippi, and started doing aquaculture. So Cedar Point facilities, cultures, spotted sea trout, red drum throughout the years, mangrove snapper, triple tail. That's really where I actually got started with triple tail. Was broodstock collection
Grew to
because we were
love it.
bringing them in to breed them, spawn them,
Mhm.
and develop the culture methods for it. And so my research project was actually on spotted sea trout and trying to get their low salinity culture. So basically getting them to spawn at low salinity
Right.
and culture them at low salinity, because salt's expensive if you want to do it. So that's the way to do it. Got done with my master's, and I had fished a couple of times with him because we were both at Southern Miss at the same time. And he had started with DMR a little bit before me. And so I was spanning the Gulf trying to find something south of I-10 that I could go do in marine fisheries. And
He raked you
the
in.
right opportunity came open at the right time, and
Mhm.
was able to get in, and been there for 5.5 years.
I love it, man. I love it. There you go. I mean, that's what we're trying to tell you guys. Like, we got they got the information. We're trying to share it, and that's where their heart lies. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of dedication, a lot of time spent, a lot of life choices made to get where you're at. Right? It ain't just somebody who just accidentally got the job.
Very understanding wife.
Yeah, there you go.
And all
That's
this,
always right.
yeah, all this information is online, right? The DMR website. That's where you send everybody.
The nuts and bolts, right?
Yeah.
The hard facts.
Yeah, the overall
Yeah.
programs, everything else. Even the triple tail tag overlays are in our sport fish restoration section.
I got to get 2022 updated on the website, but we've got through 2021 with all the graphics for where those fish moved in the Mississippi Sound. Some pretty cool stuff. And yeah, all of our programs we do, MS Rope, the MS Creel, we've got the information that you would need to understand what is this program and why is it here.
Yeah.
And we're pretty much always I would like it to be 8 to 5, but we're available to inform anglers. If you got questions, we want you to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, because I mean, for the most part, there is a reason behind every decision that we're making.
Correct.
And we're trying to go off of the best information that makes the resources as available as possible to all.
And that's where Joey and I, when we started asking around, as we started, like, kind of headed towards you guys, we were like, we had these questions, and we felt like there was this disconnect, between what you guys were doing and what people understood. And that's what we hope from our perspective, that we
Bridging the
can,
gap.
yeah, you got the information. We just kind of want to hope we can get it out to the people that follow us in a way that's conversations like this, versus sometimes you read things again, you miss the you miss the comma, you miss the but does not apply to redfish or red snapper, excuse me. So that's where we're at with that. So, gentlemen, I linked in the comments below a link to the DMR website, dmr.ms.gov.
Yep,
okay, so anybody that watched on the live, Facebook and YouTube specifically, you can click on that link in the comments. Go straight there, check it out. Just peruse the website and see, all
It's
the
a
stuff.
plethora of knowledge.
A plethora of information.
Yeah.
But we want to thank you two gentlemen for coming in here, giving us your time to come and talk with us, because again, y'all have the information. We're just the morons asking the questions.
Peons.
So,
Yep.
yeah, and thanks for explaining it as you did. So we look forward to doing more episodes with DMR, and we appreciate you guys being a part of the Brownwater universe. So unless you got anything else, Joey,
I'm good.
download the Brownwater Banter app if you don't have it. We got a Tails and Scales link right
We got
inside.
the DMR website. We got all that right there.
The weather, the tides, it's all inside that one app. It's one app on your phone. You don't have to download anything else. And you can fill out all this information. information. If you keep tuning in, and we want to thank the app sponsor, the Brownwater app sponsor.
Yeah, we did. Modern Recoil.
At the beginning. Yeah, that's
we
right.
did.
So if y'all keep tuning in, man, we'll keep doing these.
That's right.
Later.